If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 61, Using Teleport Again. Master, I'm fine, I feel great now. Slowpoke's eyes gleamed with a blue light, and a telepathic voice echoed directly in Cain's mind. Hearing the youthful voice of Slowpoke, Cain couldn't help but smile slightly. It seemed like Slowpoke was truly in good shape. Not only did he show no signs of weakness, but even his previously inconsistent telepathy now seemed to flow much more smoothly. Cain reached out and stroked Slowpoke's pink head, smiling, "Next time, don't push yourself too hard, listen to what I say." Yadong Slowpoke, enjoying the pat on his head, made a sound of contentment. Then, his eyes sparkled again, and in Cain's mind, he said, "Master, I'm fully recovered now. I can use teleport once more, and it won't be like last time." Oh! Cain's eyes lit up, clearly surprised by Slowpoke's words. If they could teleport again, they would be very close to the base. However, teleport only allows movement to places that have already been visited, so the closest location to the base where Slowpoke could teleport them would be the area around the waterfall they had been at before. Calculating the distance, it certainly wasn't far, especially compared to the distance they had covered this time. Cain was confident that once Slowpoke was fully recovered, teleporting that short distance wouldn't be difficult for him. So he didn't stop him and nodded with a smile, "All right, let's do it again, and then we'll prepare dinner." After speaking, he signaled to Murkrow, who had been keeping watch in the tree. Once Murkrow swooped down, Cain said, "Murkrow, Slowpoke has recovered, and we're going to use teleport again. Ghastly, come out too." Since finishing his exploration of the surroundings, Ghastly had been hiding in Cain's shadow, a place he found very comfortable. Ghastly slowly floated out of the shadow, circling around Slowpoke, curious about his special abilities. Yadong Slowpoke made a sound, connecting telepathically with Ghastly. It was clear that, as one of the older members of the team, Slowpoke felt a certain responsibility toward the younger, newer companion. "All right, Ghastly, don't bother Slowpoke." "Slowpoke, go ahead," Cain said with a smile after watching Ghastly play around for a bit. Ghastly, being the newest member of the team, was clearly a bit immature. He may have lived for quite some time, but in terms of a Ghastly's age, he was still a child, and with his mischievous nature, he hadn't yet started serious training, so Cain allowed him a bit more freedom. Upon hearing Cain, Ghastly obediently floated to his side, as if to say, "Look, I'm being good." After Ghastly moved aside, Slowpoke began using teleport again. Clearly, he had gained more experience, as the activation time for the move was shorter, and his energy control was much more precise. When they opened their eyes again, they were in another forest. Looking around, Cain tried to recall where they were. Compared to their quick passage through Scyther territory, where they hadn't paid much attention to the surroundings, Cain remembered this place very clearly. This was where Cain and Murkrow had been chased by a pack of Raticates, which had led Cain to meet Slowpoke at that fateful crossroads. Murkrow also clearly recognized the place, descending from the sky and pointing out some remnants on the ground to Cain. I know, that's where the Raticates were chasing us, and we built those barricades to stop them." Cain smiled, patting Murkrow's wing as he spoke. "Kakeek." Hearing this, Ghastly became intrigued and started asking Murkrow questions. As the oldest member of the team, and thus the veteran, Murkrow began recounting to Ghastly the circumstances they had faced and how he fought his way through the Raticates, defeating many of them. Cain smiled and shook his head. Ghastly's arrival had clearly made his Pokémon more lively. Murkrow, being Cain's first Pokémon, had always carried the most pressure, being a reliable and battle-hungry companion, though he didn't speak much. Slowpoke, as the second to join, was relatively shy but steady. When it was just the two of them, they often exchanged only a few words before everything fell silent. But Ghastly, with his mischievous and playful nature, had become a mediator between Murkrow and Slowpoke, causing both Pokémon, who normally didn't talk much, to start communicating more freely. Although Cain didn't want to interrupt their rare communication, the sun was about to set, and if they didn't light a fire soon, it would be harder to move around at night. "All right, stop for a moment. Murkrow, go hunt some rabbits or wild pheasants. Ghastly, gather some firewood. Slowpoke, use your psychic power to set up the tent." Cain interrupted their conversation and assigned the tasks. Murkrow and the others stopped chatting immediately. They didn't show any complaints at Cain's orders and quickly set out to complete their tasks. That night, they sat around the fire. Murkrow, satisfied after the meal, lay on the ground unwilling to move, and Slowpoke, too, didn't want to do anything after eating. Only Ghastly remained full of energy and very active. As a ghost-type Pokémon, he didn't need to eat, though he could consume energy Poke Blocks. However, Cain had not yet prepared specific Poke Blocks for Ghastly, so his meal for the day consisted of residual energy from the beasts Murkrow had hunted. During the meal, seeing Murkrow and Slowpoke eating so enthusiastically, Ghastly became curious, wondering what was so special about the food that his older teammates enjoyed it so much. However, after trying once to put food in his mouth only for it to fall to the ground immediately, Ghastly decided not to insist. After resting for a bit following dinner, Cain said, "All right, we've rested enough. Before bed, let's do some exercises to digest the food." At these words, Murkrow and Slowpoke automatically stood up, accustomed to waiting for Cain's training plan. Ghastly, though not knowing what to do, imitated the others and stood still. Murkrow, 50 uses of Dark Pulse and 100 of Wing Attack, targeting that big tree. Cain pointed to a large tree, assigning Murkrow's night training. Slowpoke, continue training your psychic power. Today you need to lift 5 rocks, 500 times. As Slowpoke's psychic power was increasing rapidly, Cain immediately raised the requirements of his training. As for you, Ghastly. Cain paused for a moment to think, today you'll just do sprints. Use your speed to run back and forth between those 2 trees, let's do 2000 reps first, I want to see what your stamina is like. Chapter 62, Ghastly's Growth Direction. Ghastly was participating in training for the first time, so Cain couldn't precisely estimate the right amount of training for him. Thus, he assigned a quantity that he deemed reasonable. After that, Ghastly went off to train on his own. The first move Murkrow trained was Dark Pulse, focusing on concentrating Dark-type energy into a single point to maximize the attack's damage. Then, he practiced Wing Attack, which is currently Murkrow's most powerful Flying-type move. Part of the move's damage comes from concentrating flying energy into the wings to increase their power, while another part relies on physical strength and the impact of the flapping. As for Slowpoke, being a water and psychic-type Pokémon, although he has decent aquatic talent, his psychic talent is much greater. That's why Cain has always focused on training his psychic power. With enough development in this aspect, and complementing it with water-type moves, Slowpoke would become a kind of mobile cannon, capable of controlling and attacking, in addition to having good defense and endurance. Ghastly, being a ghost and poison-type Pokémon, although he has a high special attack value, his strategy shouldn't be based on quick battles, but rather on wars of attrition. By using the persistence of the ghost type and the continuous damage of the poison type, the longer the battle lasts, the greater the damage he inflicts on the opponent. Of course, he first has to survive the opponent's attacks. Although Ghastly has high special attack and speed stats, his endurance is very low. If he faces a Pokémon that counters him, he could be defeated in a single hit. Therefore, the main thing for Ghastly is to survive in battle, and then attack. The longer he survives, the more damage he will cause. In addition to his special attack, Ghastly shouldn't waste his talent in speed. The more speed he has, the longer he will survive. Moreover, Ghastly can learn a variety of control moves and techniques that irritate the opponent, further increasing his ability to prolong the battle. In Cain's strategy, if Ghastly masters the moves Hypnosis, Dream Eater, Rest, and Sleep Talk, along with the poison-type move Toxic, his strategy will be complete. He could even wear down higher-level Pokémon over time. Thus, Ghastly is, in fact, the main offensive Pokémon in Cain's team. Murkrow isn't built for long battles, and Slowpoke is too slow, making him easy to counter, but these problems don't apply to Ghastly. If we consider Ghastly's future evolution into Gengar, and if he manages to obtain a compatible Megastone, then battles against higher level or higher quality opponents will be possible. When Cain appeared once again at the entrance to Team Rocket's base, a day had passed. From Raticate's territory to the Team Rocket base, it took a full day to arrive. Of course, not all the time was spent traveling, most of the time was spent training the Pokémon's moves and leveling them up. The one who progressed the most was Ghastly, who originally had the lowest level. With the help of Murkrow and Slowpoke, Ghastly, who fought against higher-level Pokémon, quickly increased his level. In just one day, he went from level 10 to level 14. Thanks to the intense battles and the influence of Murkrow and Slowpoke, Ghastly, who was already restless, became a fervent fighter, eager to battle any Pokémon. This passion was what allowed him to level up 4 times in just one day. Slowpoke and Murkrow also leveled up, reaching levels 22 and 20 respectively. The main reason was that Ghastly caused many problems. He encountered powerful Pokémon and provoked them, and when they attacked him, he sought out Murkrow and Slowpoke for revenge, which naturally resulted in their levels increasing. After a full day of battles, they finally returned. Slowpoke, it's not convenient for you to be here. Rest a bit in your Pokeball, Cain said, taking out Slowpoke's Super Ball. Being a shiny Pokémon, even though he's pink, he's still very eye-catching. Anyone could notice him immediately, so to avoid unnecessary trouble, Cain decided to store him. Of course, Cain wasn't worried about other trainers, but about some Team Rocket members on the island. They are the ones who have truly survived fire and blood, and if the reward is big enough, they might take the risk. Figures like Viper and Umbra might not be interested, but their stronger subordinates could be unpredictable. Cain handed the incubator with the Larvitar egg to Ghastly, to keep it in his shadow, and then, along with Murkrow, confidently entered Team Rocket's base. The long, familiar hallway no longer caused him the same oppression as before. They say that when your power increases, your perspective on the world changes. This perfectly describes Cain's situation. He now has 2 level 20 Pokémon with great aptitude, in addition to Ghastly, who, although he is level 14, has outstanding talent. He also possesses treasures like the geocentric purifying milk and the dusk stone. He has both Pokémon and resources, so he no longer sees the world from the perspective of a mere apprentice. The pressure of Team Rocket no longer weighs on him as much. With an entirely different attitude from when he first revived, Cain exited the long hallway of the base. Unlike his first return, when everything was desolate, this time the Team Rocket plaza was bustling with people in a hurry. Not only trainers but also Team Rocket soldiers seemed to be busy with something, going back and forth. When Cain entered the base, several observers disappeared from the plaza. Although he didn't pay much attention, at least 3 or 4 people saw him. Interesting, it seems the base has gotten more complicated. Cain smiled. Thanks to these informants, in no time, the news of Cain's return to the base spread among the strong trainers. A group quickly emerged from the dormitory area and, led by their captain, headed straight for the plaza. Each was accompanied by at least 1 Pokémon, and the leader had 2. They all displayed various emotions, nervousness, excitement, fear, but they moved as quickly as possible, afraid to miss something. When the leader reached the plaza and saw Cain in the center, he ran even faster, followed closely by the others, whose expressions grew increasingly complex. Mr. Cain, you've returned. The leader was the trainer Cain had spared in the wild, Sky, to whom he had given the coughing that belonged to Saurus. Chapter 63, Rewards and Punishments. At this moment, beside Sky was an Akans that originally belonged to him, and a coughing that clearly showed an expression of fear. He quickly walked towards Cain and knelt down on one knee. Behind him, about 20 people followed and also knelt down on one knee, shouting loudly, "Sir Cain!" This unified shout echoed throughout the plaza, attracting the attention of those busy with their tasks. Seeing that the figure standing was Cain and that those kneeling were Sky and his group, everyone showed a look of understanding. Cain slightly narrowed his eyes, glancing at Sky, who was kneeling respectfully on the ground, and the 20 people behind him. Some of these people were familiar to Cain, they used to be loners with considerable strength. The system scanned the information of these people's Pokémon, and Cain took a quick look. He noticed that the average level of their Pokémon had reached level 17, and their aptitudes were quite decent. Although 2 of them had Pokémon with orange aptitude, their level was relatively high. Cain nodded slightly, almost imperceptibly. He realized that he needed to reassess Sky's ability to handle tasks, as in just a few days, he had managed to gather considerable strength. Moreover, Sky had managed to tame Saurus coughing, not only fully controlling it but also raising its level. "Stand up," Cain said after a moment of silence, in a calm tone. With Cain's words, Sky slowly stood up, then bowed and stood beside Cain, doing his best to keep his height below Cain's. Akans and coughing showed expressions of fear as they closely followed Sky. In particular, coughing, upon looking at Cain and Murkrow, immediately averted his gaze, and his expression of fear intensified. The 20 men who had knelt behind Sky also hastily stood up. They kept their heads down, not daring to speak, watching Cain from the corner of their eyes, who was now their true leader. Some, clearly more nervous, discreetly wiped the sweat from their foreheads. Seeing that Cain showed no displeasure, they breathed a sigh of relief. "You've done well, Sky," Cain said with a smile after looking at Sky respectfully. "It's my duty, and it's all thanks to your reputation and this." Coughing, Sky responded, hesitating a little when mentioning coughing. He was considering whether or not to mention certain matters. Although he had gathered so many people in such a short time, he had used some less than honorable methods. Among the 20 people, some had been recruited by Saurus during his time, and Sky had gathered them under Fox's command. Another part were loners who, for various reasons, decided that being a lone wolf was no longer a good option. Due to Cain's reputation and strength, they joined voluntarily. This group was the least afraid of Cain and had the fewest concerns about what Cain might do to them. However, the last group, which was clearly more nervous, was the most crucial. They were people Sky had forced to join through threats and promises, using Cain's actions and Saurus coughing as proof. This last part was the main reason these individuals had reluctantly accepted. This group was the most afraid of Cain. Because, according to Sky's descriptions, Cain had been presented as a powerful, ruthless killer. In addition to the threats, there were also promises. Saurus coughing was the best proof. Cain had rewarded Sky with this Pokémon, elevating Sky from being an individual of mid to high strength to one of the few at the top among the apprentices. This fact was what made Sky speak hesitantly. Although he hadn't spent much time interacting with Cain, what little he knew of him was learned after being defeated. Therefore, he wasn't sure how Cain would react to this situation. Hearing the hesitation in Sky's voice, Cain stared at him intensely for a moment, which made Sky, who had been calm, begin to feel uncomfortable. Sweat started to appear on his forehead. Only then did Cain look away. "I said you did well. I only care about the results, not the process," Cain said in a slightly more severe tone. Seeming to understand Sky's concerns, Cain, although not very interested in the details, felt the need to give him a subtle warning not to forget who was the boss. "Yes, yes," Sky responded as his already hunched posture bent even further. He didn't dare wipe the sweat from his forehead and nodded repeatedly. As for the 20 people standing beside him, they didn't dare breathe too loudly. They had clearly felt a strong aura of violence emanating from Cain, accompanied by a trace of murderous intent. They were awed by Cain's presence while adjusting their mental attitude. Cain was quite satisfied with the situation. Although he didn't know what methods Sky had used to gather so many people, as he had said before, he only cared about the results, not the process. He had enough confidence to believe that he could control them. Besides, this was nothing more than a side move for him. The final outcome wouldn't have a major impact on his current situation. However, since it was already considered that he had a faction, it was necessary to make a gesture. "If you do a good job, there will be rewards. Give me your identity card later, and I'll transfer 1,000 points to you as a reward." Upon hearing this, everyone was shocked. It was 1,000 points. Most of those present had never seen so many points. For some, 1,000 points was an unreachable number, as even now, some didn't have 100 points on their cards. "And you, Fox, you've also done well. I'll reward you with 200 points, Cain continued. "Rewards and punishments, that's the way to manage subordinates." Fox, visibly excited, couldn't believe he had also earned a reward in points. So far, after completing so many missions, he had barely accumulated just over 100 points. Now, in one go, he had received double his total. How could he not be happy? Everyone present turned their gaze to Fox, with varying expressions of envy and jealousy. At the same time, in their hearts, they firmly decided to do something that would please Cain, so they could also earn rewards in points. As for Sky, who received 1,000 points, everyone felt envy. However, they understood that there was a great difference in strength, and he was the person closest to Cain, practically his right-hand man. But for Fox, the envy was pure. After all, they were all pawns, and the only difference was that Fox had been recruited a little earlier, but had already received a reward of 200 points. Especially those who considered themselves stronger than Fox, they were the most jealous. It's only when people's positions and abilities are similar that comparisons become more apparent. Cain noticed their expressions and said, "As long as you behave well, there will be rewards. Then you can choose between points, Pokémon, items, whatever you want." Upon hearing these words, everyone was filled with excitement, eager to prove their loyalty immediately and complete tasks to earn all the rewards. Chapter 64, Xander's Confusion. There's no need to mention the usefulness of points, they are the common currency within Team Rocket, far more practical than the League's currency. As for Pokémon, Sky, who is now Cain's administrator, holds his position today because he received a coughing as a reward from Cain. They believe that if they had such an excellent Pokémon, they too could take Sky's place. Items cover a broad range, from various berries and potions to rare moves and exotic treasures. Regarding Cain's promises, since Sky received 1000 points, no one doubted the truth of his words. Thus, Cain has formed his own small faction on the Trial Island, or rather, a large faction among the participants. This is a characteristic style of Team Rocket. Under Giovanni, there are many factions, with smaller factions within the larger ones, competing and growing together. Giovanni transformed Team Rocket from a third-rate gang into the Colossus that can now rival the League, and the factional rivalries have been a major reason for that. As long as the balance between factions is maintained, this vast power can be effectively managed. Moreover, Giovanni is an extremely confident person with a charisma that makes his subordinates compete only with each other, without any hint of rebellion. Of course, Giovanni's immense strength and the control of his powerful trump card, Mutuo, are also key factors. After teaching them a lesson and offering rewards and temptations, Cain had likewise ensured that this group would follow him without question. As long as his power was strong enough, all the small plots would be easily dealt with. "Let's go and prepare for when the trial begins," Cain said. "Yes, Lord Cain, we now have our own meeting place. The brothers in the dormitories have built a large hall as our base," Sky responded, bowing. Oh! Cain's eyes lit up. Sky's ability to get things done was truly commendable. With Cain leading and Sky guiding them, the group headed toward the dormitories. "By the way, why are there so many people in the plaza? What are they doing?" As they walked, Cain suddenly recalled that the plaza, which was usually empty, was now filled with participants and Team Rocket soldiers bustling about. "This is because..." Sky hurriedly began to answer, but was interrupted midway. "This is because the trial rules have changed." Sky, who was about to get angry at being interrupted, immediately shut his mouth upon seeing who had approached. The person who interrupted Sky was Xander, who walked up with a group of people. With his white Team Rocket uniform, short light brown hair, and sharp eyes, Xander stared intensely at Cain. Xander stopped in front of Cain and continued, "The attack trial is just one part. If someone ranked lower believes they are stronger, they can challenge those ranked above them. If they win, they take their place. If they lose, they drop 10 ranks. Life or death won't be considered." When he mentioned life or death won't be considered, an intense murderous intent flashed in his eyes. Xander viewed Cain as his only rival and didn't hide his desire to kill him. Cain merely smiled, paying no attention to Xander's murderous intent. At this point, unless Xander had a fortuitous encounter, he wouldn't be a match for Cain. "So, do you want to face me now?" Cain asked. Xander came with such momentum that even Sky thought he had come to fight, though Cain didn't think so. His words were just a joke. Cain knew a bit about Xander. Though he was someone who easily showed his emotions and had a strong desire to compete, he wasn't foolish. If they fought here, wouldn't it turn into a group battle? In that case, it would be hard to predict who would win, as in such chaotic situations, unexpected events were more likely to occur. Humph! Xander let out a cold snort. What irritated him the most about Cain was his carefree attitude. "Don't think you're already number one. If you want me to challenge you, you'll have to be number one first. Perhaps it'll be you challenging me." Cain smiled and replied, "Oh? Then I'll look forward to it." Cain's smile instantly ignited the anger in Xander's heart. Every time Xander approached with great momentum, he was met with Cain's indifference, like hitting empty air, which frustrated him deeply. "Move." Seeing that Xander wasn't speaking or moving, just standing there with a red face, blocking his path, Cain spoke. Xander's face alternated between green and red, and his fists cracked. If it weren't for the trial happening today, he wouldn't have held back. A glance at the Akans next to Xander said it all. The snake was coiled, its cold, narrow eyes fixed on Cain, awaiting Xander's command. However, while Xander had an Akans, Cain had a Murkrow. Murkrow was also watching Akans closely, ready to take it down at any moment. Murkrow was confident that if Akans attacked, he would react faster and stop it. Unable to find words, Xander let out a roar of rage and stormed off with his Akans and his followers. He realized that every time he confronted Cain, he only ended up humiliating himself. Cain completely ignored him, while he, time and again, desperately approached. As they left, Xander's face was grim, and none of his subordinates dared to speak. Xander, normally arrogant, had once again lost to Cain, and they didn't dare make a sound for fear of becoming the target of his wrath. Though Xander had to think twice before acting against Cain, he wouldn't be as lenient with them. Besides, they hoped Xander would lead them out of Trial Island. With his brother's power, they could have a good start in Team Rocket. But what they didn't know was that Xander had no intention of relying on his brother. He wanted to prove his worth on his own, and even if he left Trial Island, he would continue to depend on his own strength. Watching Xander's figure fade into the distance, Cain couldn't help but laugh. In truth, he didn't dislike Xander, although he was arrogant and extremely proud. As Cain always said, an honest villain is always better than a hypocrite. Of course, if Xander decided to be his enemy, Cain wouldn't show mercy. The distance from the plaza to the dormitory was just over 1,000 meters, but for the 20 people who had just joined, it felt like an entire day. The pressure of being around the number one was overwhelming. Moreover, they had encountered Xander along the way, and for a moment, they thought there would be a fight. They were even considering whether they should get involved if one broke out. Fortunately, it was just a scare. When they arrived at the hall Sky had mentioned, Cain was a little surprised. Although it was made of wood and looked rather rustic, its size exceeded Cain's expectations. Chapter 65, Completing the Mission. Upon entering, the hall was quite spacious. In the center, an elevated platform had been built, and atop it, there was an imposing chair. Without hesitation, Cain headed directly for the chair and sat down. Murkrow, who followed him, flew to the top of the backrest, looking down at those present from above. Cain observed the 2 rows of people standing before him and couldn't help but feel surprised. No wonder so many people crave power and occupying a high position from which they can look down on others. The view from that position can indeed be addictive. Even in his previous life, Cain never had the opportunity to take a place like this, observing his subordinates. This was the first time he had experienced something like that. Sky was at the front of the group and stepped forward to speak. Lord Cain, we are now 25 people in total. Including you, we are 26. The average of our positions is around the 40th rank, and some are among the top 10 to 20. Here, we can consider ourselves a considerable force. Cain nodded without saying anything, signaling for Sky to continue. Additionally, with you being in first place, no one dares to confront us. Although it's been a short time, in these 2 days, we have gathered a total of 237 points, all of which are on my identification card, Sky continued. On this trial island, there's an unwritten rule: joining a faction grants you protection, but you must surrender 20% of your points as payment for that protection. Keep those points with you. If someone makes a contribution, you can reward them directly. For Cain, that amount of points was insignificant. He had recently given away 1,000 points without blinking an eye. This test group that Cain had formed only had some utility on the island. Outside of the island, in Team Rocket, this group would be nothing more than a small team within the organization. However, those who survived the trials would have more potential than regular members of Team Rocket. Cain formed this group primarily to have some followers he could recruit once he was established in Team Rocket. After hearing Sky's report, Cain dismissed the meeting. He wasn't the type of person who enjoyed walking around with a group of people following him. Both in his previous life and in this one, he had always preferred to be alone. Being with his Pokémon is the only thing that truly allows him to relax. He left the group's management to Sky, as Cain preferred to act as an absentee leader. However, Cain was surprised by Sky's talent and management skills. If Sky remained loyal, he could become Cain's first true subordinate in Team Rocket. I hope you don't disappoint me, Sky, Cain murmured as he left the hall with Murkrow. Due to Viper's changes to the trial rules, the test had been rescheduled for the afternoon. At the Team Rocket base, many training activities couldn't be done publicly, and Slowpoke also had to remain inside its Pokeball, as it wasn't suitable to appear publicly here. As for Ghastly, Cain preferred to keep it as an ace up his sleeve, so he wouldn't let it appear in public either. Since the test hadn't started yet, Cain decided to visit the exchange center to submit Umbra's mission. Unlike his previous visits, this time the exchange center was crowded. The testers, who had adapted to the environment and the way of life on the trial island, had finally learned how to earn points and exchange them for various items. However, not everyone was as lucky as Cain. After completing a mission, most only earned a few points. The missions with higher rewards were usually too difficult or had already been taken by others. Once they understood how valuable points were, the testers began using them very cautiously. When Cain entered the exchange center, he didn't attract much attention. Since the test would begin in the afternoon, everyone was busy exchanging items to enhance their strength at the last minute. Except for one person, who immediately noticed Cain's presence when he entered. Standing in a corner of the counter, that familiar exchange center employee raised his hand to signal Cain to come over. When Cain reached his side, the exchange center employee smiled and said, "I didn't expect you'd return safely. That important person told me that if you returned, you should go directly to see him." Cain nodded without saying anything, surprised by Umbra's instructions. He was nothing more than an insignificant tester, yet the sub-commander of Team Umbra, an elite-level expert, had given specific instructions about his return. In a secluded corner, that exchange center employee once again opened the secret door for Cain. Cain walked through the dark hallway with a different feeling than the first time. The first time, he was filled with nervousness and confusing thoughts, but this time, he was much calmer. After 2 encounters with Umbra, Cain understood that as long as he had courage, Umbra wouldn't attack him. Besides, Umbra had even given him a badge as a reserve member of the Shadow Unit. The place was the same, the familiar room, with the bookshelf and the desk he knew. The difference was that this time, Umbra wasn't hidden under his mysterious black cloak. He was sitting calmly at the desk, reading a book. This was the first time Cain had seen Umbra's true appearance. He had light brown hair, and probably due to a lack of sun exposure, his skin was quite pale. His facial features were very defined, with a Western touch but also the delicacy of an Eastern person. One of his hands had only 2 fingers, while the other was perfectly intact, with long, slender fingers like those of a woman. Dressed in simple black clothes, Umbra had a vigorous and determined appearance. Noticing someone had entered, Umbra looked up and, this time, didn't leave Cain waiting. He smiled and said, "You've returned." It seemed he wasn't surprised Cain had come back successfully. Cain nodded and slowly walked towards the desk, where he placed the pokeball containing Jengar, respectfully setting it on the desk. Upon seeing the pokeball that Cain had brought, Umbra's expression became complex. Umbra picked up the pokeball from the desk and, through the transparent window of the pokeball, saw the Jengar inside. Jengar, who usually seemed to be lazily resting inside the pokeball, immediately stood up upon seeing Umbra, showing an expression of longing. "You've been through a lot, Jengar." Umbra, with a complex expression, murmured these words to the Jengar inside the pokeball before attaching it to the hook on his belt. Then he looked up at Cain, who remained respectfully standing to the side, and nodded. "You did well. When you leave, find the person who brought you here to redeem 10,000 points." For someone at his level, 10,000 points were nothing, something insignificant that didn't catch his attention. "Understood," Cain responded without adding more words. Cain's discretion always pleased Umbra. He knew when to speak and when to remain silent, avoiding unnecessary problems. But even though Cain didn't ask, Umbra himself seemed interested in talking, and with a smile, he asked, "Aren't you curious why I left Jengar there?" Chapter 66, Choice. Cain did not expect Umbra to ask such a question. In his impression, Umbra had always been a very efficient person, who never wasted time on unnecessary small talk. Has he changed his attitude today? Cain thought silently. Without showing any emotion on his face, he nodded honestly and replied, "I am curious, but if you don't mention it, I won't ask." Cain had always maintained sufficient respect for Umbra, not because he was a high-ranking official in Team Rocket or the sub-leader of the Shadow Unit, but because of his elite-level strength. The strong are always respected by others, and Cain firmly believed in the idea that only the strongest survive and rule. So, since Umbra was a true elite-level trainer, he gave him the necessary respect. Hearing Cain's words, Umbra was surprised for a moment but then burst into laughter. "Ha ha ha, you really are something." From the first time he saw him, Umbra had said several times that Cain was something, although Cain wasn't entirely sure what exactly that meant. The first time, he understood. The second time, he reflected and understood again. But when Umbra repeated it for the third and fourth time, Cain started realizing that the something Umbra was referring to wasn't as simple as he thought. After laughing, Umbra's smile gradually faded, and he said, "In a battle, to protect me, he was severely injured. I knew that in the trial island, there was a place where his wounds could heal quickly, and it was the same place you went to, the one inhabited by Ghastly." His gaze began to cloud slightly, as if he was remembering something. It was the first time I discovered that place on the trial island. Oh, by the way, I was one of the first to have participated in the trials of Team Rocket on this island. Cain was surprised to hear that. Umbra was one of the first on Trial Island? Umbra, as if reading his mind, continued, just as you imagine. Back then, the Trial Island had just been discovered, and out of the first participants, only 2 of us survived. I'm one of them, and you may meet the other one someday. Although Umbra didn't mention who the other survivor was, Cain had an idea it was probably the other sub-leader of the Shadow Unit, Tenebris. Let's go back to that place where the ghastly gather. You must have noticed the stone pillar emitting ghost energy continuously, right? Umbra shifted the topic from his past memories. The water there is deep, and you're not ready to explore it now. Fortunately, you didn't try to investigate too much, or you might not be here today, Umbra continued, talking to himself. You just need to know that few people are aware of that place, and you should make sure to keep your mouth shut. When your power is enough, you'll understand it for yourself. Cain's eyes narrowed slightly, but then he returned to his usual expression and nodded, saying, understood. Cain had no intention of investigating that pillar for now, especially since someone as powerful as Umbra had decided to preserve it instead of destroying it, which suggested it was a rather special place. Umbra shook his head. Although Cain seemed respectful and his response was quick, Umbra could catch a fleeting expression in his eyes. Without dwelling too much on that, Umbra continued, you've passed my first test, which means you now have the right to know who I really am within Team Rocket. Cain's heart raced. He already knew Umbra's true identity, but he couldn't prove it. After all, in Team Rocket, if you didn't have enough power, you wouldn't even have the right to know of Umbra's existence. Show me the medal I gave you last time, Umbra instructed, referring to the black cloud-shaped medal he had given him before. Cain took it from his Team Rocket belt and handed it over. Umbra took it and rubbed the surface with a finger before continuing, this medal represents the most mysterious department in Team Rocket, a medal for a reserve member of the Shadow Unit. From the moment you accepted this medal, the test began for you. The task you completed for me was the first step of this test. Without pausing, Umbra continued to explain, my name is Umbra, as you already know. I'm the sub-leader of the Shadow Unit. If you manage to complete all the tasks I assign you, you'll be able to join us. Although I can't tell you now what benefits or responsibilities you'll have, I can assure you that many people in Team Rocket would do anything to join us, though most don't even know we exist. Now you have a choice, continue with the missions until you join us or quit and keep proving yourself on the trial island, starting as a grunt or a captain, slowly climbing up the ranks. Umbra presented Cain with a rather unbalanced choice. Cain had already made his decision a long time ago. Joining Umbra didn't conflict with his goal of rising within Team Rocket. In fact, with Umbra's help, it would be much easier. But to avoid appearing too eager, Cain tilted his head and pretended to think. Umbra didn't suspect anything. After all, the information about the Shadow Unit was so secret that he couldn't reveal too much. He could only rely on Cain's intuition to choose. I choose to continue with the missions. After a brief pause, Cain said with determination. There was nothing to doubt, he had already made his decision a long time ago. Hearing Cain's response, Umbra smiled. In the future, you'll be glad you made this decision. Cain nodded without adding anything. Some things can't be said, but he knew his decision was the right one. At that moment, a buzzing sound, bzz, 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 was approaching, growing louder and echoing in the room. Cain recognized that sound and was somewhat surprised. A beedrill slowly appeared from a corner, flying toward Umbra and rubbing its arms affectionately against his. This is, Cain's expression of surprise turned into understanding. If he wasn't mistaken. That's right, this little guy hatched from the Pokémon egg I got from you, Umbra smiled, confirming Cain's suspicions. So it was true. Cain understood but then showed confusion again. Although bug-type Pokémon have a short growth cycle, the time between hatching and evolving in just a week was still extremely short. Umbra stroked Drill's triangular head, and noticing Cain's confusion, he said, this little guy has quite a bit of talent, and he's been training hard every day. Today he just evolved into a beedrill. Chapter 67, The Possibility of Temporarily Leaving the Island. Pokémon, beedrill, dark green. Gender, female. Level, 11. Type, bug and poison. Ability, sniper. Held item, none. Egg moves, Bug Bite, Focus Energy. Basic moves, Twineedle, Fury Attack. Learned moves, Laser Focus. Trademark moves, Protect, Toxic, Hidden Power, Fire. Upon seeing the datasheet of this Beedrill, Cain was truly surprised, not only by its growth speed but also by its quality. Originally, the Beedrill should have been of green quality, but now it had reached dark green, just a step away from light blue quality. Umbra truly lived up to being an elite level trainer and one of the faction leaders within Team Rocket, with countless resources at his disposal, managing to raise Beedrill's quality by 1 grade. Although this small advancement may seem insignificant, if developed properly, its combat power could increase by at least 1 level in the future. In addition to Umbra's intensive training, with all the moves he had taught it, even a blue-quality Pokémon could have a chance of being defeated. What also surprised Cain was Beedrill's ability. Generally, Beedrill has the ability Swarm, which increases the power of bug-type moves when its health is low, a decent ability. However, Beedrill also has a hidden ability, Sniper, which increases the power of critical hits. Normally, critical hit power is increased by 1.5x, but for a Pokémon with the Sniper ability, the increase is 2.25x. This is a 0.75x power boost, which could result in an instant defeat if a critical hit is achieved. So, Sniper is really powerful. If Cain had known from the start that Beedrill had this ability, he probably would have decided to keep it. However, the chance of a hidden ability appearing is extremely low, so Umbra was incredibly lucky to hatch a Beedrill with the Sniper ability. Perhaps that's why he decided to invest so many resources to raise its quality by a grade. After overcoming his surprise, Cain quickly suppressed any expression on his face. Although this Beedrill was very impressive, he didn't regret his decision. Umbra observed the changes in Cain's expression, noting that aside from his initial surprise, he didn't show any other emotion, silently nodding. This trial is quite special, so you should no longer hide your power, strive to show all your talent. I can't tell you exactly why this trial is special, but I can assure you that showing your talent won't put you in the crosshairs of people with ill intentions. Umbra's eyes became serious, and immediately, the imposing presence of an elite-level trainer emanated from him invisibly. Team Rocket, as a dark organization, had eliminated many talents before, and Umbra knew well what Cain was concerned about, but this trial was different. Hearing Umbra, Cain's eyes widened in surprise. This trial is special? Why didn't I feel that way in my past life? Haven't you noticed? The quality of the participants in this trial is quite good, and most importantly, many of them received high-quality Pokémon. Do you think they all have a brother like Xander who gives them decent Pokémon? Hearing this, Cain's eyes narrowed sharply, he was just now realizing it. It's true, why would they give green-quality Pokémon to participants if they were meant to be mere pawns? Wouldn't it be a huge waste if they died in the trial? Why didn't I notice this in my past life? Was it because my results were so poor that I wasn't entitled to notice? I know your Murkrow has good quality, and that you carried extra weight during the last trial. Although hiding your power isn't a bad strategy, I want to tell you that if you really want to rise within Team Rocket, this trial is a great opportunity. This time, it's different. Umbra said the last words almost one by one, without revealing why this trial was different, but Cain could sense the seriousness in his tone. Cain became thoughtful. If Umbra said so, then this trial must be truly special. Of course, he wouldn't be naive enough to think that simply standing out in the trial would guarantee him a high rank in the future within Team Rocket. If he really did what Umbra said and didn't hide his power during the trial, it might facilitate his future development, but it would be like dancing on a razor's edge, without any disguise. He couldn't take Umbra's words at face value, but they definitely changed his future plans. Next, Umbra said something that almost made Cain jump out of his chair. The little one in your shadow is also a Pokémon with great talent, you're really lucky. Saying this, Umbra gave Cain a meaningful look at the shadow behind him. Suddenly, cold sweat began to break out as he instinctively reached for the Team Rocket belt, seeing that there was nothing in the shadow. But the problem was, there wasn't just one Pokémon in his shadow. Facing Umbra, who was one step ahead, might be pointless, but Cain was still prepared to fight. Seeing Cain's alert attitude, Umbra smiled and waved his hand. Don't worry, I'm not going to take advantage of someone like you. Your Pokémon belong to you, I'm not going to steal them. If I wanted to attack you, why would I have chatted with you for so long? Besides, even if you release another Pokémon, what good would it do? This was the pride and confidence of an elite-level trainer. Umbra didn't believe that someone like Cain could escape his hands, even if Cain's Pokémon were of high quality. Umbra interpreted Cain's exaggerated reaction as fear of having his Pokémon stolen, which was common in Team Rocket. Letting go of the belt, Cain knew his reaction had been excessive. But one thing was certain, with his current power, even if he released all 3 of his Pokémon, he wouldn't stand a chance against Umbra. Even the Jengar he had brought couldn't be handled by Murkrow and the others. Seeing Cain gradually relax, Umbra let Beedrill go play, resting both hands on the table and leaning slightly forward. In short, make sure to give your best in this trial. If you manage to meet my expectations, I might allow you to temporarily leave the trial island. After all, you have no rivals here anymore. Umbra said something else that surprised Cain. If he could really leave the trial island early, the benefits to him would be immense. Looking at Umbra with a serious expression, Cain wrestled internally, but in the end, he couldn't resist the temptation of leaving early and nodded. I understand, Lord Umbra. Hearing Cain's affirmative response, Umbra slowly leaned back and smiled. Of course, only if you satisfy me. Chapter 68, Movement Planning. As he left the dark office, Cain noticed a bit of sweat on his back. Cain was slightly surprised that Umbra could see Ghastly in his shadow, but he accepted it, though he felt it had been somewhat reckless. Fortunately, even though he had overreacted, Umbra only thought Cain feared he would steal his Pokémon. Cain patted his somewhat stiff cheeks and exhaled deeply, trying to regain his usual mental state, which wasn't an easy task. When someone becomes absorbed in a thought, getting out of it is only possible by thinking about something else. Murkrow has already learned the moves needed for daily needs, but Slowpoke and Ghastly have not yet learned moves through TMS. Cain plans to improve both of them this time. First, there are 2 Protect TMS, which are essential. This will consume all of the 10,000 mission points earned on this occasion. However, these are necessary expenses, so Cain does not regret it. Ghastly, who acts as his closest guardian, must learn the Protect move, as it will not only allow him to block some moves in battle but will also be a great help for self-protection. So, for Ghastly, the Protect move is indispensable. For Slowpoke, Protect is also very necessary. Whether to use it in battle or before using the teleport move to escape, he can first block a high damage move with Protect, which is very practical. In addition to the 2 Protect TMS necessary as survival moves, Cain also simulated Ghastly and Slowpoke's future battles. Ghastly focuses on a combination of Hypnosis and Rest and Sleep Talk and Toxic as his main combat method. Fortunately, Ghastly has already learned Rest and Hypnosis, so he only needs to learn Sleep Talk and Toxic to establish his basic combat style. However, the current points are not enough, so it is impossible to redeem both Sleep Talk and Toxic at once, as they are highly valuable moves. If he had to choose between the 2, Cain would lean more toward Sleep Talk because, for the Poison-type Ghastly, who is not yet fully developed, Toxic would not be as effective at this time. Cain plans to develop Ghastly's Poison-type moves over time and then combine them with other Poison-type moves so he can better manage this type's energy. Therefore, Sleep Talk is a move that needs to be redeemed, which requires an additional 7,000 points. These are the resources Ghastly needs, while for Slowpoke, Cain plans to have him learn Hidden Power. Slowpoke, as a Water and Psychic-type Pokémon, can face many types of Pokémon, but he is also vulnerable to several types. He takes double damage from Bug, Ghost, Grass, Electric, and Dark types, a total of 5 types, which means he has many disadvantages in battle. If Slowpoke can obtain a suitable type for the Hidden Power move, this could help offset his disadvantage against certain Pokémon types. Yes, it's a matter of luck. The type given by the Hidden Power move depends entirely on the Pokémon itself, so it's a move that depends on chance. Although Hidden Power is quite a common move, the high demand for it makes it costly, also requiring 7,000 points for its redemption. After the first redemption, Cain had 7,400 points remaining. After rewarding Sky and Fox, he was left with 6,200 points. Adding the 10,000 points earned from this mission, Cain had a total of 16,200 points. However, to redeem 2 Protect TMS, plus a Sleep Talk move and a Hidden Power move, a total of 24,000 points is needed. Therefore, Cain does not have enough points and will have to exchange other items for points to obtain everything he has planned. Thinking quickly, Cain had already calculated everything as he left through the secret door. He approached the redemption employee he knew and took out his points card, saying, Here are 6,200 points, plus the 10,000 points that gentleman just gave me. There should be a total of 16,200 points on the card. The redemption employee took Cain's points card and waited for his next words. The 10,000 points Umbra gave Cain were already prepared. After Cain completed Umbra's mission, the employee had already guessed what might come next, but being a small pawn, it's better not to know too much. So now he just wanted to fulfill this task quietly and decided to remain silent about everything Cain did. Cain paused and finally decided to pull a jet black stone the size of a palm from the waist of his Team Rocket uniform. After thinking it over, he decided to redeem a initial level dusk stone for points. Because both the mid-level dusk stone and the geocentric cleansing milk are priceless treasures on the market, exchanging them for points at Team Rocket's redemption prices would be a waste. Instead, the initial level dusk stone, though valuable, is just an ordinary evolutionary stone that can be easily obtained if one has the money. So Cain decided to redeem the initial level dusk stone for points. According to Team Rocket's redemption list, the initial level dusk stone is worth 50,000 points, but if redeemed for points, a 30% discount applies, so Cain would only receive 35,000 points. Cain silently complained about Team Rocket's redemption system. With this discount alone, it's easy to see how many benefits Team Rocket gets each year from this redemption system. It's no wonder they've grown so quickly. Exchange this dusk stone for points, please. The redemption employee was amazed to see the dusk stone in Cain's hands, although he was accustomed to Cain's good fortune. He really is lucky, leaving no room for other participants to thrive. It's important to note that even people like Xander, who have skills and connections, if they don't excessively use their resources, have barely accumulated a few thousand points, not even reaching 10,000. But seeing Cain, with his previous 20,000 points, the 10,000 points from Umbra's mission, and now this dusk stone, he has accumulated a total of 65,000 points. The employee almost wanted to ask who the real novice was here. With a somewhat stiff smile, the employee nodded mechanically and took the dusk stone from Cain's hands. This is a initial level dusk stone, which can be exchanged for 35,000 points. Luckily, it was a initial level dusk stone. The employee feared that if Cain pulled out a higher level one, he might have exhausted all the resources of the trial island at once. Chapter 69, Hidden Power. Cain already had a clear idea about the exchange prices. Give me 2 protect DMS, 1 sleep talk, and better make it 3 hidden power DMS. What Cain was initially going to say changed slightly at the end. Since he had enough points, why not give each of his 3 Pokémon a hidden power trademark? Even if the resulting type of energy wasn't particularly useful, it didn't matter. But what if it turned out to be just what they needed? What if the type they awakened could cover their Pokémon's weaknesses? This would depend on luck. Although the exchange attendant tried to remain professional, he couldn't help but flinch upon hearing Cain spend points so freely. Here is your ID card, you still have 13,200 points. These are the TMS you've exchanged. The attendant took the TMS from a secure cabinet, handed them to Cain, and then deducted the points from his card before returning to his work, not wanting to face the shock that Cain's actions caused him again. After all, in his 2 years in Team Rocket, though he had always worked in administrative roles, he was still a team member. However, he hadn't earned as many points as Cain in all that time, and he feared that continuing to watch might make him envious. Cain glanced at the attendant, who looked a little odd, but didn't give it much thought. He stored the TMS in his storage belt and headed to a training room. Although there were trademark learning devices in the exchange room, Cain didn't want to reveal all his resources. This was his first time entering a training room, a space that Team Rocket had divided into small chambers. In addition to being able to use the learning devices, there were many training tools and some practice dummies. The use of these rooms wasn't very common, most of them were empty. Under the curious gaze of the staff, Cain paid 100 points to access the largest training room. Ghastly, check for any cameras here. Once inside the room and with the door locked, Cain gave the order. A shadow emerged from Cain's and Ghastly began exploring every corner of the place, from the walls to the ceiling. After a thorough inspection, Ghastly confirmed that there were no surveillance devices. With security assured, Cain also released Slowpoke. Having been confined in his Pokeball for so long, Slowpoke was not very comfortable. Once free, he couldn't stop yawning. For an active Slowpoke like him, it had been an uncomfortable experience. Slowpoke, hang in there a bit longer. We'll be done soon. Cain patted Slowpoke's rounded head in apology. Yaden Slowpoke quickly shook his head, indicating he wasn't complaining, just feeling a bit uncomfortable. Upon seeing Slowpoke, Murkrow flew down and began chatting with him. After a moment of relaxation, Cain interrupted their play. They were always under intense training, so moments of leisure like this were very rare. Come on, learn these moves first. Cain waved the TMS in front of them. One by one, the Pokémon returned to their Pokeballs, and Cain placed them in the learning devices to transfer the trademark moves to each of them. TMS only ensure that Pokémon can learn the move, but not that they can use it skillfully. After learning the move, a lot of training will be needed to perfect it. Cain didn't pay much attention to the Protect and Sleep Talk moves, especially the former, which can be used once learned and doesn't have many ways to improve, only gradual mastery in combat. Sleep Talk was chosen specifically for Ghastly, and he'll be able to train this move when he battles in the future. What interested Cain the most was the type given by the hidden power move that each Pokémon would awaken after learning it. The first to try out hidden power was Murkrow, Cain's first Pokémon, who always set an example for the others. Murkrow closed his eyes and began to channel the move according to the method of the move that had been transferred to his mind. Since it was his first time doing it, Murkrow took longer than usual, needing a full 3 minutes to finally release the move successfully. Small electric sparks could be seen around Murkrow, which gradually concentrated into a yellow energy sphere. Occasionally, yellow electric sparks protruded from the sphere. As the electrical energy became more concentrated, the sphere grew more solid. What were initially yellow sparks began to turn into faint blue lightning bolts. When the blue bolts surrounded the sphere in greater numbers, Murkrow lost control. He hurled the yellow energy sphere charged with electricity toward the target at the center of the room, exploding upon impact, forming a small explosion ring accompanied by a loud crash. Small yellow and blue lightning bolts dispersed from the center of the explosion, disappearing into the air as they reached the edges of the room. The hidden power move works like this: it gathers the awakened type's energy into a sphere, which is then thrown at the opponent, dealing damage to a single target and to those within the explosion area. It's worth noting that Team Rocket's training room was extremely well equipped. Despite the explosion, it only left a few black marks on the floor and caused no other damage. Moreover, the loud noise did not attract any staff members, demonstrating that the room's soundproofing was also excellent. Suddenly, Cain thought that having access to a training room like this was very useful. Returning to Murkrow's move, it seemed he had awakened the electric type in his hidden power. The appearance was similar to the Electro Ball move, though the electric energy wasn't as concentrated as in that move. Although visually similar, the two moves function differently. Cain was quite satisfied that Murkrow had awakened the electric type. Although it didn't cover any of his weaknesses, it did expand his offensive capability. For instance, he would no longer have issues when facing water-type Pokémon. Murkrow, being a flying and dark type, might struggle in certain battlefields like lakes or aquatic terrain, especially against water-type Pokémon. Although it wouldn't be easy for him to be defeated, it also wouldn't be easy to defeat his opponent. But with this new electric type, Murkrow could cover those weaknesses. Additionally, in battles against other flying-type Pokémon, the hidden power move could give Murkrow a significant advantage, solidifying his dominance in the skies. This initial success delighted Cain, who patted Murkrow's feathers as a reward. Chapter 70, Sleep Talk. After testing Murkrow's hidden power type, it was time for the second team member, Slowpoke. Like Murkrow, Slowpoke also took 3 minutes to successfully use the hidden power move for the first time. Unlike the yellow, electrically charged energy sphere Murkrow used, the energy sphere Slowpoke created was red and emitted an intense heat. Upon seeing Slowpoke's hidden power, Cain immediately knew it was fire type. Compared to Murkrow's electric type, Slowpoke's fire type hidden power was simply perfect. Not only did it enhance Slowpoke's offensive capabilities, but it also compensated for some of its weaknesses. Indeed, this fire type hidden power is, at least for now, the most suitable for Slowpoke. Slowpoke is a water and psychic type Pokémon, making it vulnerable to bug, ghost, grass, electric, and dark types. However, thanks to this fire type hidden power, Slowpoke will no longer be as vulnerable against bug and grass type Pokémon. Though it can't completely eliminate the disadvantage against bug and grass types, it at least gives Slowpoke an effective attack method, preventing it from being just an easy target. The fire type hidden power is also effective against steel and ice types, meaning Cain won't have trouble facing those Pokémon in the future, thus enhancing the team's versatility. However, it's foreseeable that in future battles, Cain will avoid having Slowpoke face electric and dark type Pokémon directly, as these two types are extremely dangerous for Slowpoke. Ghastly's hidden power came as a surprise to Cain. It turned out to be grass type. Although the nature of hidden power is unrelated to a Pokémon's type, Cain didn't expect it to be grass. Among the 18 existing types, grass is the most vulnerable, being weak against 5 different types. However, it also has several types it can counter. Even though Ghastly is an intangible being, it is vulnerable to ground-type moves. With this grass-type hidden power, Ghastly now has the ability to defend against ground-type Pokémon. Combining this power with its hypnosis and other moves to buy time, the grass-type hidden power increases its offensive capabilities. After verifying the nature of his 3 Pokémon's hidden power, Cain was quite satisfied with the results. Besides Murkrow, Slowpoke, and Ghastly had mitigated some of their weaknesses thanks to hidden power. And since each had a hidden power of a different type, the entire team's offensive capacity was greatly expanded, allowing Cain to devise more effective strategies against Pokémon outside their usual strengths. Since they had finished assessing hidden power, Cain decided not to waste the rental time for the room and began training in this safe environment without worrying about revealing their abilities. Cain set up a training plan for his Pokémon. First, Murkrow and Slowpoke focused on perfecting the hidden power move they had just learned. Ghastly, on the other hand, underwent specialized training under Cain's supervision. Since Ghastly had been captured recently, Cain had only had the chance to measure its stamina and energy during prior training sessions and a few battles against low-level Pokémon. However, Cain was already quite familiar with Ghastly's characteristics. The immediate goal was not to perfect the newly acquired hidden power, but to learn to master the Sleep Talk move. Sleep Talk allows the Pokémon to use any of its known moves while asleep, but Cain had seen a powerful Gengar in his past life that could select a specific move to use while sleeping. Although Cain didn't know how it had been trained, the fact that it was possible meant that the Sleep Talk move could be controlled. Therefore, Ghastly's first training objective was to attempt to select a specific move while using Sleep Talk. At first, Cain didn't have overly high expectations. He didn't demand that Ghastly use a specific move, just that it could select one at random within a set range. So, in the training room, Murkrow and Slowpoke practiced hidden power by attacking targets in the room while trying to dodge the random moves Ghastly would unleash while sleeping. Initially, Ghastly's moves were disordered and unpredictable, but Cain gradually adjusted the environment and conditions under which Ghastly used Sleep Talk. Eventually, Ghastly managed to restrict the selection to 5 moves. This progress was a significant breakthrough, confirming Cain's hypothesis that, with special methods, Sleep Talk could be controlled to select specific moves. If Cain could fully implement this plan, both Ghastly and Gengar in the future would see a significant increase in their combat power. However, fully mastering Sleep Talk would be extremely difficult. Cain began speculating on what could motivate a Pokémon to use the Sleep Talk move. Could it be related to the dream scenario? Ghastly's first test was unsuccessful, leading Cain to conclude it wasn't due to dream scenes, as it was impossible for a meaningful dream to form in such a short time. The first attempt had failed. Then, Cain wondered if the trainer's voice could influence the use of the Sleep Talk move. On the second attempt, Cain tried giving commands while Ghastly used Sleep Talk. Although Ghastly could execute the move, there was no control over which move was selected. The second attempt also failed. Cain's final hypothesis was that before sleeping, Ghastly should mentally rehearse the move it wanted to use. Although concentrating was difficult and random thoughts often arose, this time, the direction was correct. Before using Sleep Talk, Ghastly focused on remembering the hidden power move. Upon sleeping and using Sleep Talk, the hidden power move appeared much more frequently. Cain was pleased with this confirmation. Though challenging, at least he had found a direction to work towards, hadn't he? Excited by this discovery, Cain even speculated about the idea of using telepathy to strengthen Ghastly's conscious focus when using Sleep Talk. This was another training direction worth exploring. Chapter 71, The 4 Factions. When Cain appeared again in the central plaza of the base, he was only accompanied by Murkrow. Slowpoke had returned to his Pokeball, while Ghastly had hidden in Cain's shadow. Because the third trial was about to begin, the plaza was gradually filling with more people. In the previously empty plaza, besides the large test stone that still stood in the center of the elevated stage, there was now a smooth battle area next to it, marked with some lines. This would likely be the place where the losers would have to challenge each other after the trial. The terrain was quite simple, they had only pulled out the weeds and leveled the ground. But for a battle, this was more than enough. People gradually gathered in the plaza. Now, almost all the participants belonged to a small faction. Cain positioned himself in the west corner of the plaza. It wasn't long before Sky arrived with his group. Seeing that Cain was already there, they quickly ran over to him. "Mr. Cain!" With a series of respectful greetings, they all lined up behind Cain, forming one of the few factions in the plaza. Cain only nodded slightly and then closed his eyes to rest. The plaza was now clearly divided. Cain's faction consisted of about 20 people, located in the west corner. Xander had the largest group, with approximately 40 people in the east, watching Cain from afar. Then there was Jasmine, who in the last trial had ranked just behind Cain and Xander. She was accompanied by about 20 people in the north, most of whom were girls. The few boys in her group seemed of little importance and were scolded by the girls. Around 30 individuals stood in the south, forming a group of loners who had temporarily banded together. They all kept their distance from each other, without interacting. They had probably grouped together to avoid being harassed by the three larger factions. Amid scattered murmurs, Viper appeared with his group, though Umbra was not with him. Following an almost unchanging process, they began the simplest yet most effective test, the attack power trial. This time, Team Rocket, to avoid a repeat of the previous trial where no one wanted to go first, decided to follow the order of the identification numbers. Although there were 300 numbers in total, the process was quick since many of the numbers no longer existed. This also allowed for effective tracking of those eliminated and the strength of those remaining. Murkrow stood calmly beside Cain, ignoring the furtive glances of greed, envy, and fear surrounding him. He entertained himself by preening his feathers. To Murkrow, this trial was incredibly boring. Hitting a hard, foul-smelling rock with all his strength, what was the point? It only measured a Pokémon's attack power, not its overall combat capability. He had observed all the Pokémon present and, besides the dead-eyed snake in front of him, the large Zubat from the north, and the long-haired dog from the south, he saw no one worthy of his attention. If it weren't for the immense pressure he felt from the people in the stands, Murkrow would likely have convinced Cain to skip this boring trial. It was a waste of time, training more would be better. Cain, who knew Murkrow's character well, smiled and said, "Hold on a bit longer. After this trial, we probably won't have to do such boring things anymore. And who knows, maybe you'll have some battles today." As he spoke, he cast a meaningful glance toward Xander and his Akans on the opposite side. Noticing Cain's gaze, Xander also looked in his direction. When their eyes met, Xander smirked, as if to say, "Just wait and see," before turning away with a slight grunt. Cain's words lifted Murkrow's spirits. Following his gaze, he spotted the Akans he was so interested in and began to get excited, raising his wings. But just as he was about to take flight, he remembered where he was and reluctantly lowered his wings. Cain was accustomed to Murkrow's combative nature, but today it seemed that his desire for a fight would be fulfilled. Not only Xander, but also Jasmine, the trainer of the large Zubat from the north, and Alec, the strongest among the loners from the south, occasionally cast glances in his direction. These glances carried a mix of emotions, excitement, envy, desire, and an insatiable thirst for battle. A smile slowly formed on Cain's lips, his eyes reflecting his growing interest. This trial is quite intriguing. I wonder what deeper purpose lies behind Viper's modification of the rules, Cain thought silently. He was sure Umbra had influenced the rule changes, perhaps even led them. Though Umbra wasn't present in the plaza, Cain constantly felt the presence of someone powerful watching him, especially focused on him. After all, if he wanted to meet the requirements to leave the trial island, he needed to crush everyone present with overwhelming force. That was the true test of strength. Not only did he have to lead in the attack power trial, but he also needed to dominate in battle. Of course, as Umbra had mentioned, this trial was different from the previous ones. There was no need to hide the participants' talent, and the best way to assess talent was through real combat. In a life-or-death arena, facing opponents of similar strength, no one would hide their true power if their life was on the line. After all, what good would hiding your strength do if you didn't preserve your life? Furthermore, some of the participants with good instincts, or those with hidden connections, had also sensed that this trial was different. That's why all those who were confident in themselves had set their sights on Cain as their primary target. This was exactly what he needed to satisfy Murkrow's desire for battle and fulfill Umbra's intention to test Cain's capability. Cain hoped that this battle would clearly establish his influence among the participants, subjecting everyone to his will. Interesting. Chapter 72, Terrifying Power. This time, everything was arranged smoothly. Under the call of the chief examiner, everyone obediently walked toward the test stone to conduct the test. They had already gone through 2 rounds of tests, so the participants were quite familiar with how to achieve a high attack value. The results showed that everyone had improved noticeably. Although the increase wasn't as large as in the second test, under the threat of life and death, the improvement was considerable. Especially for those who were at the bottom, they trained desperately during this week to avoid being in the last place, as being last meant death. Number 46, Attack Value, 198. Next. Number 54, Attack Value, 178. Next. Number 58, Attack Value. As the examiner announced the numbers and attack values one by one, some were satisfied with their results and smiled, while others, worried, could not hide their anxiety. However, they didn't fall into despair, as they still had the option to challenge in the last opportunity to fight until the end. Each test was like a filtering process, eliminating the weak and letting the strongest shine. If you had talent, you wouldn't go unnoticed. Icans, use bite. Boom. Number 99, Attack Value, 337. It wasn't long before it was Xander and his Icans' turn. This time, the attack value reached 337 points, being the first to surpass 300 points up to that moment. Amidst exclamations of amazement, Xander, with a proud expression, stepped down from the stage with his Icans. Since Cain surpassed him in the last test, Xander had intensified his training, and his Icans, with its great pride, was also very unsatisfied with being overtaken by Murkrow. Moreover, with the training methods that Xander obtained from his brother for Icans, the improvements over the week were remarkable. Surrounded by his followers, Xander returned to his original position. After glancing at Cain, his expression softened. Although he was proud, he wasn't foolish. It was clear that the attack value test wasn't the main point, the focus was on the challenges that would come after. No matter how well you did now, if you couldn't win in the battle, it was all in vain. Cain also had to admit that, with limited resources, Xander had trained his Icans almost to perfection. If it weren't for Cain having lived a previous life, Xander probably would have achieved first place overwhelmingly. Xander's result stirred a wave of excitement, and the following participants gave their all. Number 134, Attack Value, 308. This was the second participant to surpass 300 points after Xander. Her Pokémon was a large Zubat, the same girl who took third place in the last test, Jasmine, with the number 134. In his past life, Cain didn't have many memories of her. Even after joining Team Rocket, he had no contact with her. She was a very mysterious person. As a girl who had managed to keep third place in an environment as cruel as the Trial Island, under the pressure of Cain and Xander, it hadn't been easy. Additionally, she had managed to gather a group of people to compete with Xander, without him being able to do anything about it. This person is not simple, Cain thought silently. Number 156, Attack Value, 330. The strongest loner, Alec, the first participant to evolve his Pokémon, his Poochyena, which evolved into Mytyena, using this advantage to surpass Jasmine and take second place, right behind Xander. Since Umbra mentioned that this test was different, Cain had noticed more and more strange things. So many Pokémon with excellent potential, some of which could even attract the attention of Team Rocket captains or officers, were handed over to these participants just like that. Xander's Icans, Jasmine's giant Zubat all were high-potential Pokémon, and even Alec's Mytyena had outstanding potential. Furthermore, among so many Kanto Pokémon, a Pokémon from Hoenn suddenly appeared. Isn't that strange? Thinking about it carefully is terrifying. This test definitely has something odd. In his past life, where survival was already a challenge, Cain hadn't thought much about this, but now, repeating it, he realizes how strange it all is. Number 234, Prepare for the test. The examiner's voice interrupted Cain's thoughts. Finally, it was his turn for the test. Under everyone's watchful gaze, Cain approached the stage with Murkrow. Those who had already been humiliated by Cain dared not mock him this time. And with the way he eliminated Saurus, recruited Sky and distributed Saurus's coughing, Cain had built the image of a ruthless and cunning character in the minds of all participants. For the first time, Jasmine and Alec fixed their gaze on the stage. As someone who had surpassed everyone, Cain left a deep mark in their minds. Murkrow, Use Tailwind. Increase speed and use Wing Attack. Ignoring all the looks, Cain calmly gave his command. Murkrow flew into the sky, increasing its speed with Tailwind. Upon reaching the peak, it dove down, the sound of its flight resonating throughout the square. The people below watched Cain's sequence of actions in astonishment. Although they already knew that Cain had a special trick for Murkrow's attack, this time the trick was more striking, showing an all-out attack stance, in stark contrast to the previous times when it seemed carefree. He didn't make them wait long. Murkrow, diving at high speed, struck with its wings filled with flying energy, emitting a faint white light, crashing against the test stone with a roar that made the ground seem to tremble. Although the test stone was extremely hard, made with high Team Rocket technology and almost indestructible, it felt as though it was about to break. Perhaps because of the loud commotion, after the attack, the square fell into complete silence. All eyes, after a brief blink, fixed incredulously on the white letters on the black stone. Attack value, 458. In the square, those closely watching the test stone were speechless, faces filled with disbelief. They were prepared for Cain to take first place again, but they didn't expect his attack value to reach 458 points. The result far exceeded their expectations. Cain not only secured first place but left Xander behind by 121 points. It's important to remember that some participants with the worst results can't even reach an attack value of 121. Today's result was a true overwhelming victory. Only one word can describe the impression Cain left on everyone's hearts. Terrifying. Chapter 73, Xander challenges Cain. This kid, Viper, seated in the stands, was taken aback for a moment before letting out a chuckle and cursing softly. I don't know what Umbra told him, but this time he really didn't hold back at all, he murmured with a slight smile after looking again at the large white numbers on the test stone to make sure there was no mistake. As the head instructor of Team Rocket who had been on the trial island for a long time, he was the one who best understood the level Cain had reached with this result. Without exaggeration, it could be said that Cain's result was among the most outstanding of all trial participants over the years. Ahem. Seeing that the examiner was unresponsive, Viper gave a soft cough, snapping everyone out of their astonishment. Hearing the cough, the examiner on stage shuddered and quickly announced, "And number 234, attack of 458 points." Hiss. With murmurs of awe, the entire field erupted into chaos. Damn it! Damn it! Damn it! Damn it! Damn it! Damn it! There was no other word that could describe what they were feeling at that moment. Cain had completely consolidated his position as number one in this test, surpassing everyone by an overwhelming margin. Below the stage, Jasmine's mouth slightly opened, her beautiful face turned somewhat rigid, and her eyes fixed on Cain and Murkrow on stage with a mixture of shock and admiration. After a while, her chest rose and fell slightly as she murmured to herself, "Is this his true strength? Is this the change the master spoke of?" Xander opened his mouth, wanting to say something, but in the end, only muttered to himself, "Last time he already surpassed me, but this time he's that far ahead. What kind of monster is he?" In just 1 week, to go from an attack value of over 200 points to over 400 points, he really is a mysterious character. "This test is getting more and more interesting," said Alec, who was standing among the crowd, with an apparently calm voice. However, the hand that slightly trembled as he stroked my Tyene revealed that his mind was not as calm as it seemed. "Is this Cain's true strength? Saurus didn't die in vain." Staring at the score on the test stone, Sky, Cain's main subordinate, murmured to himself in disbelief. Sky had thought that even if Cain managed to be number one, it would be by a small margin, just like last time when he barely surpassed Xander. But he hadn't expected Cain's true strength to be so impressive. Although some were still astonished, their glances at Cain reflected complex thoughts, and it was unclear what they were planning. After the examiner recorded the result, Cain stepped down from the stage with Murkrow, returning to his original place. As a leader, Cain was already surrounded by his followers, and after this result, they drew even closer. They felt fortunate to follow someone so strong, thinking that he would face fewer problems on the trial island and that, in Team Rocket, their status would rise if they followed his steps. After Cain, there were no more surprising results, except that Sky, with the help of his recently captured Coughing, managed a score of 288, which drew a bit of attention. Using the Coughing that previously belonged to Saurus, Sky achieved an attack of 288 points, which surprised Cain. After all, coughing wasn't known for its direct attack, and the fact that it had improved so quickly after being captured showed that Sky had talent as a trainer. Shortly afterward, everyone finished their tests. Although the final results surprised some, the positions didn't change much. Cain, with an attack value of 458 points, crushed everyone and reclaimed first place. The rankings were as follows. First place, Cain and Murkrow with 458 points. Second place, Xander and Akans with 337 points. Third place, Alec and Mytaina with 330 points. Fourth place, Jasmine and Zubat with 308 points. Fifth place, Sky and Coughing with 288 points. The main positions didn't change, except that Sky replaced Saurus in 5th place, and Alec rose to 3rd place thanks to his Poochyena evolving into Mytaina. There were no major surprises. However, recalling Umbra's words, Cain noticed a few special people. Although their scores weren't high and they were ranked around 10th place, it seemed they were hiding something, maybe their true strength or some other secret. Ahem. The examiner's cough on stage refocused everyone's attention. The basic test has ended. According to the new rules, if anyone is unsatisfied with their result, they can challenge any participant up to 10 positions above. Each person has only one opportunity to challenge. If the challenge is successful, they will take the defeated opponent's place. If they fail, their position will drop 10 places. In this challenge, life or death is not taken into account. The examiner announced, firmly looking at everyone. If the attack test only evaluated the Pokémon's strength, this unrestricted battle tested the trainer's abilities to manage battles, give orders, and train their Pokémon. After all, a Pokémon's strength doesn't solely depend on the trainer's commands. Moreover, since this challenge was life or death, every challenger was a mortal enemy to the challenged. If they failed, the result could be fatal. Listening to the examiner, the field filled with a slight tension. Some hesitated, even among those who wanted to challenge their positions. Despite their dissatisfaction with their results, the possibility of a deadly duel made them waver. Facing death was terrifying, and although some felt confident before, they couldn't avoid feeling fear now. Cain, standing beside the stage, observed the participants, finally resting his gaze on Xander and smiling. At that moment, Xander was also looking at Cain. He had been thinking about this moment, but Cain's result made him hesitate. However, when he saw Cain's gaze upon him, he finally made his decision. Humph! A bunch of trash. I'll go first. I challenge number 1, Cain. Xander clenched his fists, raised his head, and announced his challenge to the examiner. Chapter 74, The Challenge, 1. I challenge, the first place, Cain. After making a firm decision, Xander didn't hesitate any longer and walked decisively toward the challenge area, bringing his Akans with him. Upon hearing Xander's words and seeing his actions, all eyes in the venue instantly focused on him. This feeling of being the center of everyone's attention gave Xander more confidence, and his expression became even more determined and haughty. Watching Xander walk toward the battlefield, the Team Rocket examiner frowned and looked toward Viper in the stands. Xander's identity was no longer a secret at Team Rocket's base. If anything happened to him, even Viper would struggle to face the wrath of Xander's brother, so the examiner could only wait for Viper's decision. Viper displayed a serious expression, though he understood Xander's decision, he also knew that with everything in Cain's favor, Xander couldn't accept being increasingly outdone by him. Xander's pride wouldn't allow him to be pushed aside without taking action. Viper gave a slight nod, indicating to the examiner that the challenge could proceed. With Viper's approval, the Team Rocket examiner sighed slightly. If the conditions permitted, he wouldn't want to be involved in this fight, but now, as the examiner, he had no other choice. Xander stopped on one side of the battlefield and laughed loudly, Cain. What are you waiting for? Let me see how strong you really are. I hope you're not just all show. Cain stretched lazily, twisting his neck as he smiled silently. Xander's challenge wasn't a surprise to Cain. In fact, when he had fixed his gaze on Xander earlier, he had partly done it to provoke him and ensure that he would decide to challenge him. If everything went well, Cain would soon leave the island, and as the leader of the faction he had just consolidated, he needed to leave a strong enough impression. ID number 234, Cain, number 2, Xander with ID number 99, has challenged you. Do you accept the challenge? Asked the Team Rocket examiner from his position as judge. Cain's smile grew wider, and his Murkrow, standing by his side, also locked eyes with his trainer. As Cain's Pokémon, Murkrow had long been eager to teach Xander a lesson for his arrogant attitude. It had also wanted to face Xander's Ekans for quite some time. I accept. Cain said calmly as he advanced to the other side of the battlefield under everyone's watchful eyes. Finally, the expected outcome arrived. The examiner sighed, resigned to seeing the two people he least wanted to see face each other standing on the battlefield. He knew Xander's identity well, and he had also heard from Viper about what had happened with Cain and Umbra. Cain was someone chosen by a very powerful superior, and compared to him, Xander's brother was nothing more than a joke. This challenge is a death match. Each participant may only use one Pokémon, and there are no additional battle rules. The challenge ends when one side surrenders or dies. Now, let the challenge begin. At the examiner's words, the first challenge of the test finally began. Instantly, a tense atmosphere filled the place. Ekans, use Glare. Xander shouted, initiating the battle. Ekans' move, Glare, used the patterns on its belly to intimidate its opponent, serving as its first attack. Murkrow. Take flight, use Tailwind and avoid looking at it. Cain quickly issued a precise order as well. Caw. Murkrow soared into the air, surrounded by a faint white current that minimized air resistance. In the blink of an eye, it became a black shadow disappearing into the sky. Screech. Ekans. Frustrated by the failure of his first strategy, Xander frowned and ordered a second attack. We'll use Screech too, Murkrow. Cain countered. Both Pokémon turned into sound generators, one on the ground and one in the air. The formless sound waves spread, causing discomfort to everyone present, both humans and Pokémon. Ekans, unable to fly, was at a disadvantage against the sky-soaring Murkrow. Although both attacks lowered the opponent's defense, Cain still controlled the flow of battle. Cain. Are you going to keep your Pokémon in the air the whole time? If you do, I'll truly despise you. Xander shouted, frustrated by the situation. Cain sneered in disdain. Idiot, your taunt is pathetic. But you've convinced me. Murkrow, get close and use Wing Attack. Xander's comment had achieved its purpose, making Cain go on the offensive. Though it seemed like Cain was letting himself be influenced, in reality, Cain had merely decided it was time to attack. Xander smiled grimly. Although he'd been insulted by Cain, he had achieved his goal, getting Murkrow close enough for Ekans to strike. Ekans, don't dodge. Use Wrap and then bite. The greatest advantage of snakes lies in their venomous fangs and muscular body. These moves would maximize Ekans' potential. Murkrow, dark as night, shot toward Ekans like a black lightning bolt, its wings glowing with a white radiance. Ekans, patiently waiting, braced for impact. Boom! The impact was explosive, raising a cloud of dust. Murkrow's wings, charged with flying-type energy, struck Ekans hard. Chat! Even though it was prepared to endure the hit and counterattack, Ekans hadn't anticipated the strength of Murkrow's attack. It let out a cry of pain. Ekans' defensive reflex, in response to the pain, prevented it from immediately counterattacking. Murkrow, following Cain's training, didn't hesitate to quickly retreat. Ekans' attempts to use Wrap and Bite met only empty air. Xander couldn't believe it, his face darkened. Quick, use Acid. Fortunately, Xander reacted in time, and Ekans' eyes widened with fury as it shot a ball of purple acid, striking Murkrow as it retreated. Hiss! The acid began to corrode Murkrow's feathers, reducing its defense. After the first exchange, both Pokémon separated, observing each other from a distance. With just one encounter, they had each gained a sense of the other's power, which only fueled their fighting spirit even more. Both of them shared a warrior's nature. Chapter 75, Challenge, 2. Xander clenched his teeth as he watched Cain, who remained calm on the other side of the plaza. The frustration in his heart was palpable. Ekans was clearly at a disadvantage against the agile Murkrow. Moreover, Murkrow's high attack power left Xander unsure if Ekans could hold out to the end if they continued exchanging blows. Ekans was breathing heavily, Murkrow's last attack had been truly difficult to endure. On the other hand, Murkrow flew in the air, its battle thirst evident in its eyes. Although it had been hit by Ekans' acid move, for someone used to fighting in the wild, that was just a minor wound. The power difference between the two Pokémon was clear. Xander, give up. You can't beat me, Cain said calmly, looking at Xander, whose face had turned pale. Honestly, if he could persuade Xander to surrender, Cain would rather not continue fighting, as Xander's brother was a high-ranking officer in Team Rocket, which made Cain somewhat cautious. However, if the battle continued, Cain wasn't sure he could keep it under control. Since this was a death match, Cain would show no mercy. If it ended with Akan's dead, he would have made a complete enemy of Xander. If they became enemies, even with a brother who was an officer in Team Rocket, Cain wouldn't hesitate to finish him off to eliminate any future threat. As for that officer, whom he had never met, Cain, with his accumulated experience and system support, was confident he could surpass him and end this rivalry. That was his absolute confidence. But he needed time to grow. Cain's words, which sounded like an attempt to show mercy, came off as extremely offensive in Xander's ears. What Cain said struck deep at Xander's pride. It seemed he had made a firm decision when suddenly Xander slightly waved his hand over his Team Rocket belt, and a dark purple sphere appeared in his hand. Cain frowned as he saw Xander's movement, sensing a bad omen. Xander clenched his teeth tightly, his expression turning sinister. "You forced me. Prepare to die, you bastard." With that, he threw the dark purple sphere toward Akans, who, recognizing what it was, swallowed it immediately. From the stands, Viper, who was watching Xander throw the object, slightly frowned but said nothing. With his experience, Viper knew exactly what that object was. That purple sphere was listed in the Team Rocket exchange catalog, priced at 5,000 points. It could rapidly boost a Pokémon's poison-type energy, multiplying the poison energy within it by 5. However, such a powerful effect also came with great side effects. The Pokémon that consumed this pill would be in a weakened state for a week. Xander obviously wanted to take this chance to finish off Cain once and for all. If he succeeded, no one could surpass him in the test, even if he was weakened for a week. He was confident he could recover. This pill had been given to Xander by his brother before coming to the island as a last resort for special situations. He hadn't expected to use it against Cain. Akans. After consuming the purple pill, Akans felt a surge of energy in its body, even exceeding its limits, causing its body to expand slightly. A faint purple mist began to surround it. Hiss! The purple mist around Akans began to corrode the ground, leaving it full of pits and cracks. These changes happened in an instant, before Cain could prepare. Akans, use Poison Sting. Xander ordered with a twisted expression. Dozens of purple needles shot out of Akan's mouth, filled with poison and with increased speed, aimed at Murkrow. Murkrow, use Gust to deflect those needles. Although he didn't know what Xander had given Akans, Cain could see from the purple mist and poisonous needles that Akans had been enhanced with poison-type energy. Following Cain's command, Murkrow concentrated its flying energy and created a small tornado to deflect the needles. However, the venom-laden needles pierced through the tornado, only slightly weakened by the wind, and continued their path toward Murkrow. With astonishing speed, the venomous needles struck Murkrow, enveloping it in a purple cloud. It was poisoned. That's an extremely strong poison. Cain frowned, seeing Murkrow had been poisoned, surprised by Xander's hidden card. He hadn't expected Xander to have something like that, showing that his brother held considerable power. Ha ha ha! Now your Murkrow is poisoned. You have no choice but to finish this quickly. Xander laughed maniacally, seeing the poison take effect. With Murkrow poisoned, Cain could no longer afford to prolong the battle to wear down Akans. Murkrow, use Tailwind and attack with Wing Attack. Let's end this quickly. Evaluating the situation, Cain decided to strike directly. He needed to end the battle quickly. Caw! Though Murkrow felt weakened from the poison, it obeyed Cain's command, darting like a black lightning bolt toward Akans. Murkrow's Wing Attack was now its strongest move, perfect for a quick strike strategy. Akans, use Scary Face and then Poison Fang. Xander, not hiding his murderous intent, commanded Akans to use its most powerful poison-type move. Murkrow closed in, but its speed dropped slightly due to Akan's Scary Face move. Even so, it didn't hesitate and readied its wings to strike. However, the poison's effects kicked in at that moment, and along with the speed reduction from Scary Face, although Murkrow managed to hit Akans, it was also struck by Akan's poisoned fangs. Hiss! Caw! Both Pokémon backed away after the clash, but this time, the result was different. Akans had taken the attack, but Murkrow had also been poisoned again, with the purple mist around it growing even denser. The poison was building up in Murkrow. The battle was tipping in Xander's favor and Cain and Murkrow were at a disadvantage. Ha ha ha! Today you'll die! Xander grew more confident after seeing Poison Fang's effect. If he could kill Cain here, what did it matter if he was weak for a week? No one in the audience would dare to challenge him. But what Xander didn't expect was that, at that moment, Cain smiled. Chapter 76, Challenge, 3. Xander saw Cain smile and was astonished. In a situation like this, how could he still be smiling? The others present also noticed Cain's smile and immediately felt somewhat uneasy. They hadn't expected Cain, who was at a disadvantage, to be smiling at that moment. Was this a show of disdain toward Xander? However, they only saw Cain reach for his Team Rocket belt, producing a small remote control and a pale yellow pill in his hand. Everyone's gaze overlooked the remote and focused on the pill in his hand. It was just a common detox medicine, something that could be directly exchanged from the Team Rocket rewards list for barely 10 points. Although its effect was decent, it clearly couldn't eliminate the lethal poison affecting Murkrow at that moment. Ha ha ha! Cain, are you joking? Do you think that trash detox medicine can neutralize a Cain's poison? Xander laughed heartily. He thought Cain had some strategy, but he hadn't expected it to be just a common detox medicine. This type of medicine, though effective, could only slightly alleviate the poison in Murkrow's body. Cain's smile widened even more. Excited, Murkrow? Cain ignored Xander's words and asked with a smile. Caw! Noticing the remote in Cain's hand, Murkrow cried out excitedly. Since the last battle, Cain hadn't released Murkrow from its burden, and now that he had, Murkrow felt even more confident about the upcoming fight. Sky also frowned, concerned about Cain's unfavorable situation. If Cain lost, he probably wouldn't have a bright future either, and he clearly didn't quite understand what Cain was doing. Look at the remote in his hand. That's the important part. It seems to be a custom remote for Team Rocket's load. With a shout of surprise, the other object in Cain's hand was finally revealed. Apparently, this person hadn't spent a short time exploring the Team Rocket rewards list. Suddenly, all eyes focused on the remote in Cain's other hand, showing expressions of astonishment. That Murkrow, which was already so fast, was carrying a load? That Murkrow, which already had such powerful attacks, was carrying a load? And in a life-or-death duel like this, Cain had been holding back his strength? Questions and exclamations arose in everyone's minds. Cain, paying no attention to the surprised looks of the others, lightly pressed the remote with his long fingers and tossed the detox medicine toward Murkrow with his other hand. Caw! Murkrow, immediately feeling its body lighten, cried out in excitement. In the instant before the detox medicine fell to the ground, Murkrow swooped down and swallowed it in one gulp. Although the poison in its body hadn't been eliminated, the medicine helped suppress it a little. Do you think that will be enough to defeat me? Keep dreaming. Ekans, use Poison Sting again and show him your toxicity. Xander reacted quickly, ordering Ekans to attack again. Murkrow, dodge. Get close and use Wing Attack. Murkrow flew sideways, dodging the poisonous stingers flying toward it, and accelerated again, heading toward Ekans. With Murkrow's clearly increased speed, long-range attacks like Poison Sting had no chance of reaching it. You're asking for death. Ekans, use Scary Face and Poison Fang. Although Murkrow had dodged the Poison Sting, Xander was unfazed and issued another order. Based on what had happened before, Ekans and Murkrow would clash again, and at that point, the poisoned Murkrow would gradually lose its ability to resist. Cain smiled faintly. Did they really think the load training was in vain? Murkrow, under the effects of the Scary Face move, struck Ekans with force. Ekans, whose venomous energy was enhanced by a purple pill, had a significantly reduced sense of pain. Although Murkrow's hit was strong, it didn't hurt as much as the first time. Ekans was about to use Poison Fang on Murkrow again. Bang! However, this time it was destined to fail. Just as Ekans' fangs were about to bite Murkrow, the latter accelerated and dodged Ekans' attack in time. Murkrow, don't stop. Continuous Wing Attack. Take advantage of the weakness. Ekans, hang on a bit longer, use Scary Face and Poison Fang. Xander shouted, gritting his teeth. Murkrow's speed increase had left him with no options, and he could only hope Scary Face would slow Murkrow down again. Fortunately, this time the Scary Face effect took hold, and Murkrow's speed was reduced once more. Murkrow, use Protect. But just as Xander was feeling triumphant, and Akan's poisonous fangs were about to bite Murkrow. Cain's cold voice echoed like a sword piercing his heart. A green shield surrounded Murkrow, blocking Akan's poisonous fangs. Protect. The survival move Cain had made Murkrow learn first. At the most critical moment, it was used successfully. Murkrow's wings moved again, as if they were sharp blades, and struck Akan's with force, who watched in horror. Bang! This time, Murkrow hit Akan's with all its might, sending it flying toward a corner of the field, where it was completely incapacitated from further fighting. The sound-based defense-lowering attack, along with the consecutive wing attack moves, had finally knocked Akan's out. It couldn't be denied that Xander's Akan's was truly strong. Of course, that purple pill also played an important role. Xander was paralyzed in shock, and so was everyone else. They hadn't expected the outcome to turn out like this, with the situation taking an unexpected turn. Murkrow, kill him! But Cain's cold, emotionless voice sounded again, making everyone shudder as they watched Cain give a death order. Didn't they know Xander's brother was a Team Rocket officer? Was Cain really going to be so ruthless? For Cain, the moment Xander gave the kill order, their enmity could no longer be resolved. If someone wants to kill me, they have to be prepared to be killed. Hearing Cain's order, Xander's eyes narrowed, and upon seeing Murkrow flying toward Akan's, Xander quickly ran, shouting, "Stop!" The Team Rocket examiner also quickly shouted, "Stop immediately!" He really didn't want to intervene at that moment, but due to Xander's special situation, he had no choice but to speak. But Cain acted as if he heard nothing and showed no intention of stopping Murkrow. "Stop, kid! He can't die yet!" To everyone's surprise, the person who spoke this time was Instructor Viper, the highest authority figure on the trial island. However, he couldn't hide the tone of resignation in his voice. Instructor Viper had ordered Cain to stop the attack. "Stop, Murkrow!" Cain, frowning, ordered Murkrow to stop with resignation. He could ignore everyone else present, but he couldn't ignore Instructor Viper's words. Because otherwise, he might die. Since Instructor Viper didn't want Xander to die, Cain spared his life. However, although he wouldn't die, he wouldn't escape punishment. Chapter 77, Destroy One of His Eyes. Destroy one of his eyes, Murkrow. Murkrow, who had paused mid-flight, moved even faster now. Before Xander could reach them, Murkrow fiercely pecked at Akan's eye. When it rose back into the air, a bloody eyeball was dangling from its beak. "Akan's!" Xander shouted, stumbling as he ran toward his Pokémon. Murkrow didn't hesitate at all and swallowed the bloody eye in one gulp. In the face of this scene, no one dared to say a word. Even Viper silently approved of Cain's behavior, as he himself had set the rules of a death match, though he was now contradicting himself. Cain turned his gaze toward Viper, meeting his stare without hesitation, a questioning seriousness in his eyes. He didn't believe it was only because of Xander's brother. Although Xander's brother was an officer in Team Rocket, that only placed him in the mid-tier. Viper, as one of the senior leaders of Team Rocket, was on a completely different level. Viper frowned under Cain's intense gaze, but he didn't become angry, knowing there were reasons he couldn't reveal. "He's still useful," was all Viper said, in a tone that left no room for argument. As one of the main instructors of Team Rocket, offering Cain even a brief explanation was a concession, a courtesy out of respect for his friend Umbra. Otherwise, anyone else who dared to look at him like that would have died many times over. Cain understood that it was time to let this go. Though Viper hadn't given him a full explanation, there wasn't much he could do but accept the situation. However, Cain understood the hidden meaning behind Viper's words. This test wasn't like the others. Murkrow, although unsatisfied, returned to Cain's side. Just when it was about to finish off Akan's, it was stopped, which left it frustrated. However, at least it had managed to blind that annoying snake, which provided some consolation. Cain petted Murkrow's feathers to calm its agitation, taking several antidote potions from his belt and administering them one by one. He couldn't deny that, after ingesting the purple pill, Akan's venom strength had significantly increased. Murkrow didn't manage to purge the poison entirely until it had consumed 5 antidotes. Xander, stumbling, finally reached Akan's, pulling out vials and potions from his belt and pouring them desperately into his Pokémon's mouth while using healing sprays to stop the bleeding from the damaged eye. The burning pain from the disinfectant made Akan's, even while unconscious, tremble uncontrollably. If it had only been an ordinary Pokémon who lost the ability to battle, it could have recovered quickly with proper treatment, but Cain's case was different. After ingesting the purple pill, Cain's body sensitivity had decreased, and its loss of combat ability was a form of self-preservation. The purple pill's side effects were severe. If Cain didn't recover soon, it might experience a drop in level, or worse, its inherent quality, forever losing the ability to keep up with Murkrow. Moreover, the damage Murkrow had inflicted on Cain by blinding it in one eye reduced its combat ability by at least 20%. Cain decided not to continue with his intent to kill Xander and Cain. Though Xander had clearly shown intent to kill him, Cain didn't view him as a serious threat. He simply had the habit of eliminating any potential risk. At this point, Cain already had the capability to dominate Xander, and in the future, the gap between them would only widen. Besides, it was clear that the purple pill wasn't easy to assimilate. Although Cain had lost its ability to fight, Xander acted as though he were in an emergency, administering a huge amount of medicine. Under the reverent gazes of everyone in the square, Cain finally walked away from the battlefield with Murkrow. Once Cain left, the examiner formally announced, "Challenge over. The challenger has failed, his ranking drops by 10 positions." After controlling Cain's injuries, Xander silently returned it to its Pokeball, lowered his head, and left the battlefield, heading straight to the accommodations without stopping in the square. This time, Xander had truly learned his lesson. If it hadn't been for Viper's intervention, he would likely have lost his life. This experience was a lesson he would not forget: there is always someone stronger. Sky watched as Cain approached. Before, he had harbored some doubts, but now those doubts completely vanished. When Cain reached first place on the leaderboard with 458 attack points, Sky was already impressed, but he hadn't expected that was not Murkrow's full power. It was only when Xander exhausted all his options that Murkrow showed its true strength, dominating with its speed and power. Moreover, Sky knew that Cain didn't only have Murkrow, he also possessed a Slowpoke just as strong. Considering Murkrow's strength and Cain's overall power, Sky realized he could no longer afford any doubts. Finally, Sky accepted reality: if Cain was so strong and had so much potential, then following him with loyalty wasn't such a hard choice to make. In the end, it was Cain's command that fully convinced Sky, who was now resolved to never betray Cain unless something entirely unexpected happened. Sky had been impressed by Cain's strength and tactics. "Mr. Cain, do you need any healing potions? We still have some in stock." Sky quickly approached Cain, and his attitude was no longer as reserved as before. His tone was respectful, stemming from genuine admiration. Cain looked at Sky in surprise, noting a change in him. He seemed to have understood something. Cain shook his head to indicate he didn't need anything. After clearing out the poison, Murkrow's condition was quite good, so it didn't make sense to waste healing potions. The 20 or so followers standing behind Cain were visibly excited. Having such a powerful leader made them feel lucky to have joined him. After Cain and Xander's challenge, others began taking turns challenging their opponents. However, compared to the intense battle between Cain and Xander, the other challenges seemed simpler and less meaningful. Though these were also death matches, except for those with deep grudges, a true fight to the death was rare. Everyone on the trial island knew that if you couldn't win a fight, it was best to surrender to avoid more serious consequences. After all, only the top 10 places received rewards, and the positions after that held little importance. However, there was an exception: the fight for last place. That was the most intense battle in the trial. Everyone knew that being last meant elimination, and elimination meant death. So, if they were already doomed, why not fight to the end? Thus, after the first person in last place successfully challenged someone, those who remained in last place continued to challenge frantically. Over time, the death toll increased. The challenge trial continued until dusk, ending amidst gasps of amazement. In total, 5 people died during the challenges, and though 3 survived, their Pokémon weren't treated in time and also perished. In these circumstances, although the surviving trainers wouldn't die immediately, their fate was sealed for the next trial. The new rules established by Viper had quickly brought this trial to a bloodier level of combat. Chapter 78, The 3 Executives of Team Rocket. A massive cargo ship sailed across the vast ocean, with a thick column of white smoke rising from its tall smokestack, giving it the appearance of solitary smoke in a desert. At the ship's bow, a young man with black hair and clothing leaned against the railing, tilting his body slightly forward, his hair freely waving in the sea breeze. The humid air provided a feeling of great comfort. Beside the young man, perched on the railing, was a crow-like Pokémon, completely black, with sharp eyes gazing intently at the horizon. This young man and his Pokémon were none other than Cain and Murkrow. After the last trial, Cain's results had left Umbra quite satisfied, so as agreed, he pulled him out of Judgment Island early. This cargo ship belonged to Team Rocket, and it delivered supplies to Judgment Island every month. With Umbra's permission, Cain boarded the ship to return. Although in his previous life he had left Judgment Island once, this time, unlike before, he could clearly see the return route from the cargo ship. Cain realized that the location of Judgment Island was on the maritime border between the Kanto and Johto regions. How does it feel? Even though you've been away for less than a month, doesn't it feel like you've been far from civilization for a long time? Just as Cain and Murkrow looked toward the horizon, a slightly hoarse voice sounded from behind. Umbra emerged from the cargo hold and walked onto the deck, approaching Cain and leaning on the railing alongside him. "Mr. Umbra." Cain greeted him respectfully. Umbra waved his hand, indicating formality wasn't necessary. Though his status in Team Rocket was very high, he was the person least concerned about such formalities. He had always believed in the supremacy of power. Those who possess power, possess privilege. Cain didn't yet have power, but his potential had caught Umbra's attention, and for a few other reasons, Umbra wasn't overly authoritative with him. "It doesn't feel much different. I was an orphan before, and surviving in society wasn't much different from surviving on Judgment Island. The weak get beaten, it's a devouring world, and everything we do is only to survive." Cain answered calmly. Although those memories had gradually faded, the feeling deeply etched in his bones remained. Umbra was surprised by Cain's response, then laughed, a laugh that was sincere and genuine. "Seems like we've had similar experiences." His eyes began to lose focus, as if sighing or remembering something. The two fell silent, with only the sound of the sea wind and waves crashing against the ship as the background. After a moment, Umbra came back to himself, smiled wryly, and said, "Living so long, you're bound to remember the past." Cain smiled with him, showing no other expression. Though Umbra was extremely powerful and, as a deputy leader of Team Rocket in the most secretive division, he should have been a ruthless figure. However, after several encounters, Cain realized that Umbra wasn't difficult to deal with. As long as he kept his presence in check, he could seem like a friendly neighbor. "This is a League ID card I had prepared for you. All the data has been manipulated, so as long as no one above the Elite 4 level investigates thoroughly, there won't be any issues." Umbra took out a League ID card from his pocket with the League insignia and a photo of an unknown person, handing it to Cain. Cain was somewhat surprised to receive it. It was a League ID personally prepared by Umbra. If it was as he said, Cain could have a legitimate identity and openly live under the sun in the future. "This is a human skin mask crafted by so-called experts in Team Rocket. They say that as long as it's not torn or burned, no one will be able to tell it apart from a real face. This mask matches the appearance in the photo on your League ID card." Umbra pulled out another mask, as thin as a cicada's wing, and tossed it to Cain. With this ID card and special mask, Cain believed that even people who knew him well wouldn't recognize him in a face-to-face encounter. Of course, as long as his Pokémon didn't reveal his identity. So when Umbra handed him the ID card and mask, Cain had already decided that in the future, his Pokémon would need to correspond to his two different identities. Murkrow would be his Team Rocket Pokémon, while Slowpoke would be his Pokémon within the League. Although this might be a bit complicated, if it could guarantee the independence of his two identities. Then, in the future, he might even try infiltrating the League and eventually reach a position like Koga's, rising to the Elite 4. It wouldn't be an unlikely possibility. At the same time, if he advanced in Team Rocket, his power would grow quickly with the resources of both sides. Probably, the purpose behind the ID card and mask Umbra prepared for him had this very goal in mind. "Half an hour until we arrive. Our destination is Vermilion City. When we get there, disembark on your own." Umbra continued, "With the badge I gave you, go to Team Rocket's base at the Lake of Rage in Mahogany Town, in the Johto region. I need you to bring something to me. Someone will contact you when you get there." After saying this, he took a deep breath and stretched before heading back to the cabin. Vermilion City. Cain looked at the League ID card and the mask in his hand, then watched Umbra walk away after assigning the task, with a glint of intelligence in his eyes. No wonder Team Rocket's Judgment Island had never been discovered by the League. Vermilion City, being the location of Surge's gym, one of Team Rocket's three great executives, surely has been secretly covering some of their actions. The three great executives of Team Rocket are Surge of Vermilion City, Sabrina of Saffron City, and Koga of Fuchsia City. They are the three deepest nails Giovanni has embedded within the league. Among them, Koga is the most formidable. When the Indigo Pokémon League split into the Kanto and Johto regions, Koga rose to the Elite Four Poison-type position in the Johto region, becoming one of Giovanni's greatest internal supports within the league. Though Surge and Sabrina didn't reach the same level as Koga, their skills are not much lesser. Even Sabrina, known as the Psychic Queen, if we talk about a full 6-on-6 battle, Koga might not be able to beat her, as the Psychic type has an advantage over Poison. Furthermore, as a ninja, Koga is skilled in ambushes and assassinations, and in a direct confrontation, he'd struggle to defeat Sabrina, whose psychic ability is comparable to an elite-level Pokémon. As for Surge, unlike Sabrina and Koga, his greatest strength lies in group combat tactics. He's the most skilled in leading large groups of people in mass battles, like a general leading an army. Therefore, the three have their own strengths and are considered equals among Team Rocket's three great executives. Chapter 79, Vermilion City. If an ordinary person were to arrive in Vermilion City, the first thing they'd notice is that it seems especially peaceful. Vermilion City is an apparently tranquil place that hosts the largest Pokémon association in the Kanto region, so it's hard to imagine that one of the major bases of Kanto's largest criminal organization, Team Rocket, is hidden here. This situation is largely due to Lieutenant Surge's presence, keeping Team Rocket's members in check. Although Team Rocket's influence is strong in this area, the city remains notably calm. In his previous life as a Team Rocket member, Cain had visited Vermilion City on multiple occasions, so he was well acquainted with the surroundings. In this place, as long as one doesn't cause trouble, there won't be any issues. However, the mission Umbra gave Cain in Mahogany Town, located in the Johto region, was much more complicated. The gym leader of Mahogany Town is an elite-level trainer, known as Price, the Winter Ice. His skill with Ice-type Pokémon surpasses that of most elite trainers. If not for his temperament, he would undoubtedly hold a place among the Elite Four of the league and might even have a chance at becoming champion. Although Price wouldn't pay attention to someone like Cain, his presence in Mahogany Town shows how seriously the league takes this place. Thus, this mission is full of uncertainties and potential dangers. Half an hour later, the ship finally arrived at Vermilion City's port. Watching the various vessels in the harbor, the freighter returning from the trial island blended in perfectly, showing no signs of unusual activity. A young man disembarked from the ship, with a common appearance, wearing an ordinary trainer's outfit and accompanied by a pale pink slowpoke. This was Cain, fully disguised. Using a human skin mask and dressed as a league trainer, his cold demeanor from the trial island had completely vanished. Breathing in the salt-laden sea breeze and feeling the firm ground beneath his feet, Cain had finally arrived in Vermilion City in the Kanto region. Vermilion City, located in southern Kanto, is the region's largest port city. The whole city revolves around maritime trade, and it's filled not only with cargo ships. The most famous port in Vermilion City is Vermilion Port, the largest in Kanto, where massive ocean liners like the SS Anne, the SS Aqua, and the Seagalop ferry dock regularly. Although it's not the most developed city in Kanto, it's right behind Saffron City. Taxes generated from maritime traffic allow for rapid urban development. Team Rocket, which controls Vermilion City, reaps immense benefits from this situation. Lieutenant Surge is stationed here for a reason. When Cain left the harbor and entered the city, the sun was already beginning to set. The streets were full of busy people, yet despite their haste, their faces showed satisfaction. Clearly, Vermilion City's peaceful environment is appreciated by its residents. Due to it being a port city, the arrival of an unknown person like Cain didn't attract much attention. People like him arrive every day in large numbers. This was exactly what Cain wanted. He didn't want to stand out like an animal in a zoo. Though he had left the trial island, he still carried a trace of its wild atmosphere. However, with his past experience, he concealed this aura well, making people perceive him as a trainer who had spent considerable time in the wilderness. Those who can survive long periods in nature are usually respected. With a pokeball on his waist and a slowpoke at his side, Cain made it clear he was a trainer, so no one tried to provoke him. But now Cain faced a problem. As the saying goes, a hero without a penny can't accomplish much. Cain was completely out of money and was experiencing what it meant to be penniless. The first thing he needed to do was get some money. Following some signs on the street, Cain reached a Pokémon goods store in Vermilion City. Given his situation, he sold a few non-essential items and managed to get some money. Since he couldn't sell the truly valuable items he had, he only managed to get 5,000 Poke dollars. It should be mentioned that the League ID card Umbra provided was very secure. Another function of this card is that it acts as a bank card. Cain immediately deposited the money he had just obtained. Finally, Cain's bank account went from 0 to 5,000 Poke dollars. After exchanging the money, Cain quickly left the Pokémon goods store and followed signs to the Pokémon Center. The Vermilion City Pokémon Center is located in the city center. As a hospital specialized in treating Pokémon, it occupies a huge area, almost the size of 2 football fields, and stands 5 or 6 stories high. Dressed in his League Trainer outfit, Cain didn't attract attention from the Pokémon Center guards. After showing his League ID card, he entered without issue. In his previous life, Cain hadn't visited Pokémon centers much. When he was weak and had no legal status, he had no right to enter these League-controlled places. Later, when he grew stronger, he no longer needed them, so his visits were rare. This was Cain's first time entering a Pokémon Center since his reincarnation, but he was familiar with the facilities. Inside the Pokémon Center, there was not only a Nurse Joy but also numerous medical assistants and several Chansey. Due to the high number of trainers coming to treat their Pokémon, the staff was very busy. It's no wonder Pokémon Centers are one of the League's most important places. Although busy, everything was well organized, and League trainers maintained a high level of conduct. Except in emergencies, everyone queued up to wait for their turn. Besides being a treatment center, Pokémon Centers also offer lodging. One of Cain's main goals in coming here was to spend the night. Of course, he also had another objective, to perform a complete checkup on his Pokémon to ensure they had no hidden injuries he couldn't detect. With his experience as a breeder, Cain knew how dangerous hidden injuries could be. Although they may not show at first, if they accumulate, they can become serious problems, affecting the Pokémon's performance and even reducing its potential or leading to its death. Although Cain hadn't detected any hidden injuries, and his system hadn't registered anything unusual, his system's database on hidden injuries wasn't very extensive. So, to be completely sure, he preferred to rely on League technology and perform a thorough checkup on his Pokémon. Chapter 80, Pokémon Center. Team Rocket has many scientists, and in some technological areas, they even surpass the League. However, in the medical field, the League is far ahead. The Pokémon Center, which possesses the world's most advanced medical technology, is one of the League's most important institutions. One could say that, without the support of Pokémon Centers, the overall combat capabilities of League trainers would be significantly reduced. Therefore, the existence of Pokémon Centers further strengthens the Pokémon League's position. There weren't many people conducting medical exams on their Pokémon, so after taking a number, it wasn't long before Cain's turn came up. Listening to the numbers announced over the speakers, Cain went to the corresponding counter, where a health worker greeted him with a professional smile. Each Pokémon Center has only one Nurse Joy, who mainly handles serious injuries. For relatively simple physical exams like this, her personal intervention isn't needed, otherwise, she'd be overwhelmed. Here is my League ID card. Please conduct a full physical checkup on all my Pokémon. Cain handed his ID card and 3 super balls to the health worker, smiling slightly. Before entering the Pokémon Center, Cain had stored Slowpoke and Ghastly in their super balls, so this exam would be for all 3 Pokémon. Although Cain intended to keep Murkrow and Ghastly's presence hidden, as he was now an unknown trainer, no one would pay special attention to the Pokémon he used, so he didn't have to worry about revealing his identity. Hello, a full physical exam for 3 Pokémon costs a total of 3,000 Poke dollars. Do you prefer to pay in cash or deduct it directly from the bank account linked to your ID card? The worker maintained her professional smile while inserting the card into the machine. After Cain's details appeared on the computer, she asked with a smile. Please deduct it directly from the bank account. Also, I'd like to know if I can book a night's accommodation here. Cain nodded as he responded, taking the opportunity to inquire about lodging availability. The worker, maintaining her expression, nodded and replied, certainly, a night's stay costs 500 Poke dollars. Would you like to deduct everything at once? Yes, please. I appreciate your care of my Pokémon. Very well, no need to worry, the Pokémon Center exam will be thorough. Here's your room card and your waiting number. The exam will take a bit of time, so feel free to wait in the reception area or go directly to your room. Once we're done, we'll notify you immediately. With a few clicks and pressing the enter key, the worker completed the charge and returned Cain's ID card along with a waiting number and room key. It's worth mentioning that the league is quite reasonable, even a full, complex physical exam for one Pokémon only costs 1,000 Poke Dollars. Adding the 500 Poke Dollars for one night of accommodation, Cain was left with 1,500 Poke Dollars in his account. However, this is coming from someone like Cain, accustomed to dealing with large sums. For an ordinary person, spending so much at once would be unfeasible, especially for trainers from less fortunate families, as it's a considerable amount. In the Pokémon world, an average worker earns between 10,000 and 20,000 Poke Dollars a month. Compared to that, this price isn't low. This is why being a trainer is a costly occupation, and not every family can afford that level of expense. Therefore, the appearance of Team Rocket provided many people from lower classes who wanted to be trainers a huge opportunity. Not everyone joining Team Rocket has to go through trials like Cain's. What he experienced is an exception, a selection process designed to create loyal members. For most, joining Team Rocket is relatively simple. Of course, getting in is easy, getting out, not so much. While waiting, Cain decided not to go directly to his room or the reception area but to wander around the Pokémon Center. After a quick tour, Cain gained a general understanding of Vermilion City Pokémon Center. The Pokémon Center has 6 floors. The first floor is for simple treatments and exams, the second is for serious injuries and hospitalization areas, the third is a large dining hall offering food for both humans and Pokémon, the fourth and fifth are lodging areas, and the sixth floor is reserved for important league personnel, to which Cain didn't have access. Behind the Pokémon Center, there's a large open space for training Pokémon, with various well-equipped battlefields for trainers to use. Overall, it's a very reasonable design, and the facilities are quite complete, making the service prices quite fair. After touring the entire Pokémon Center, which took about 30 minutes, Cain waited a bit longer in the reception area before being informed that the exam was finished. Finally, Cain retrieved his 3 Pokémon and was told that all were in perfect condition and showing excellent development, earning him some compliments from the staff. Cain simply smiled, and after releasing Slowpoke from its Super Ball, he headed to the dining hall on the 3rd floor. After all, it was time for dinner. Slowpoke, let's try the league's food. Compared to the roasted meat and fish you usually eat, this will be a different experience. Cain patted Slowpoke's head as he spoke with a smile. Yaden, hearing there would be food, Slowpoke, the most food-loving Pokémon on Cain's team, immediately showed an excited expression and let out a joyful sound, clearly thrilled. It was evening, and the dining hall was beginning to fill up. When Cain entered, there were already a few people in line, some with their Pokémon by their side, others chatting and laughing with friends. Slowpoke closely followed Cain. This time it didn't use its psychic powers to levitate, as after some training, it could finally keep up with Cain on foot. However, Cain and Slowpoke's arrival didn't go unnoticed and caused a bit of a stir. Everyone in the dining hall turned their attention to Slowpoke, whispering and discreetly pointing. "Doesn't that Slowpoke look a bit unusual? Are you silly? That's a shiny Slowpoke, it just has a lighter color. That trainer's really lucky. That Slowpoke is walking quite fast. Who could that trainer be? He doesn't seem to be from around here." Although their voices weren't loud, the dining hall was fairly quiet, so Cain heard their comments clearly. He frowned, aware that Slowpoke's distinctiveness attracted attention. But no one wants to feel like an animal in a zoo, being observed by everyone. End of chapter.
Thanks for listening.